Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
Tim Burton, director of Batman, Beetlejuice, and Edward Scissorhands, now takes you to a completely different world. The true story of a Hollywood legend, Ed Wood.
And action!
He made movies like no one else.
You want to keep moving. You've got to get through that door. Ah, that was perfect.
Perfect? Do you know anything about film production?
Well, I like to think so.
He had an eye for talent.
I met Bela Lugosi.
Well, I thought he was dead.
This is the most uncomfortable coffin I've ever been in.
No, he's very much alive. You flying saucer?
He had a passion for storytelling.
Get me transvestites. I need transvestites.
You're flashy. They want that. Okay. But they want professionalism. So Nick Nelly without losing naivete.
What kind of a movie is this?
It's science fiction. A heartbreaking romance. Grave robbers from outer space.
Grave robbers from what?
And he had a secret he couldn't hide.
I like to dress in women's clothing. Panties, sweaters, pumps. It's just something I do.
You don't like sex with girls?
No, I love sex with girls. Wearing their clothes makes me feel closer to them.
How can you act so casual when you're dressed like that?
All right, everybody, let's finish this picture.
Touchstone Pictures presents Johnny Depp, Martin-Landau, Sarah Jessica Parker, Patricia Arquette, and Bill Murray in the true story
Give him a hand. Keep rolling.
of an unforgettable filmmaker.
We're making another movie. I got the Church of Beverly Hills to put up the cash.
How do you get all your friends to get baptized just so you can make a monster movie?
And his legacy that will live forever.
How do you burn this arm?
Shake his legs around. Looks like he's killing him. This is the one.
Put in! I command you!
This is the one I'll be remembered for.
Ed Wood, a Tim Burton film.
Really? Worst film you ever saw? Well, my next one will be better. Hello?
Greetings, my friends. You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you're listening to The Projection Booth. I am Mike White. Joining me is Mr. Rob St. Mary.
Finally, it's time to take action. Goodbye, penis.
Sure. And now, for the first time, we are bringing you Mr. Steve Schultes.
Do my toes.
My friends, can your heart stand the shocking facts about the film and the filmmaker Ed Wood? The 1994 film directed by Tim Burton stars, big surprise, Johnny Depp as Edward D. Wood Jr., a notoriously bad filmmaker who gave the world some of the most astounding films ever made. We talked a lot about Wood on our previous Orgy of the Dead episode, where he wrote the book that the film was based on. This time we're turning our attention to the man and his early days of breaking into the business and creating his masterworks, Glen or Glenda, Bride of the Creature, and Plan 9 from Outer Space. Rob, when was the first time you saw Ed Wood, and what did you think?
I saw it in high school because it came out in 94. I was still in high school, and I remember I saw it the year after it played at the theater because I think it only played at one theater in the Detroit area, and I saw it on VHS, and my friends and I bought it, and basically senior year, we watched this thing on a loop. And one of the great things about the film is that it's so quotable. There's so many great lines. It was kind of an inspiration, like I've talked about before, Mystery Science Theater being a great inspiration for filmmakers because you get to learn what not to do. When we went back and watched all those Ed Wood films, oh yeah, just like that as well.
The first time I saw it would have been the midnight premiere at the Ann Arbor 1 and 2, which is no longer there. Can echo pretty much everything that Rob said. Like, so quotable. Loved it immediately. Even though I had only seen one Ed Wood film up to that point, which was Plan 9. And then since then, I've gone back and checked out his other stuff. It's great.
I also saw this one in the theater. I like how this movie barely made any money in the theater, but yet all three of us saw it there.
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't see it in the theater? Oh, you saw it in high school on video.
On video, yeah.
Oh, I thought you saw it in high school at the theater.
Nope.
At the one theater that was playing it, which might have been the Star John R, maybe? Is that where I saw it?
I don't know. For some reason, I wanted to believe that it played out way out at the Maple, but I'm not sure if that was the case or not, because, to be honest, it wasn't on my radar until, for some reason, I think it may have been the Film Threat cover or something, and the film had already come and gone, and then saw it on video.
Yeah, I definitely saw this one in the theater, and I remember I was really touched by this film. I really, really liked this a lot. I mean, it was beautifully shot. It had a lot of those Tim Burton elements to it, but it didn't really hit you over the head. This was still when Tim Burton was somebody who I really respected as a director. He was still on that real winning streak. Batman Returns, which we've talked about on a previous show. He had done Beetlejuice, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, so he was really on top of his game. Of course, Edward Scissorhands, all these kind of things. It was before, and I know I'm going to get some shit for this, but it was before he kind of fell off the wagon and started doing things like Mars Attacks and Sleepy Hollow, Planet of the Apes. I mean, Sleepy Hollow has some good bits to it. Mars Attacks, I like the aliens, but just seemed like such a precipitous drop in quality after Ed Wood that to me this is kind of one of his last great films. It's kind of fitting that it was made about a really low budget, terrible filmmaker, but it is one of Tim Burton's greatest films to me.
Yeah, I think the fact that they didn't have a huge budget probably was responsible for that. I mean, if you don't have a budget, then you have to have good characters and character arcs and story and yeah, it really affected me as well. I mean, up to that point, I was a huge fanboy. Was really sad to see kind of the downward arc his career took after that.
To me, the biggest nail in the coffin is Planet of the Apes, but I definitely wasn't as in love with Sleepy Hollow and Mars Attacks as I could have been.
Burton, to me, is great when he has one key character to work with, and that key character is a dark outsider. I mean, even Pee-wee is a dark outsider.
You don't want to get mixed up with a guy like me. I'm a loner, Dottie. A rebel. There's a lot of things about me you don't know anything about, Dottie. Things you wouldn't understand. Things you couldn't understand. Things you shouldn't understand.
I don't understand.
I think when he has one key figure to work on who's a dark outsider, he does well, because I think that that's sort of his own personality, or at least a personality we're led to believe. I don't necessarily know the man. And if you look at his films, those are the ones where he does really well with. I'd have to say his return, making good film again, was Big Eyes. So once again, teaming him up with the cats who wrote this script some 20-something years later.
I literally just watched Big Eyes. Like the tape stopped like 2 minutes before I jumped on the phone with you. And I don't know if I need to see it a second time to like it, but I just found it really excruciating. It was one of those things where it's just like, oh my God, this feels like a Lifetime movie. And I didn't even see his mark on the film. It just felt like anybody could have directed that movie.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that on another show.
That works. You know, when it comes to Ed Wood himself, I mean, I don't even know. I know I had seen Plan 9 up to this point, and I had gone through Blockbuster carried a lot of Ed Wood movies. They carried things like The Sinister Urge and some of the other early ones. I had never seen Glenn or Glenda up to this point, but I had seen a lot of scenes. I had seen all the crucial scenes, I think, in It Came From Hollywood. Are you guys familiar with It Came From Hollywood?
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that, no.
Well, It Came From Hollywood was kind of a compilation of clips and previews. It felt very like Something Weird, kind of, like thrown together. And then there were skits in between that were done by people like Dan Aykroyd and John Candy and Cheech and Chong and Gilda Radner. It was interesting to see these clips. And I mean, it was really well put together. And I fell in love with It Came From Hollywood when it came out. I think I saw that one also at the theater a few times, just kind of one of those afternoon time killers. And I had seen all the big scenes like Ed Wood handing the sweater, or taking the sweater from Dolores Fuller and all that. So it was neat to see those kind of reenacted by Sarah Jessica Parker and Johnny Depp in this one.
We can't top it, John, but we must make people more aware.
You're right. A remake.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
But how?
Climb on. Maybe we can work it out together.
You jogged my memory. I did see that. I saw that a number of times. I just forgot the title. I think HBO used to run it quite a bit. The Amazing Colossal Man, I remember, was featured, and yeah, that was a great little movie.
Yeah, it was a lot of things that we ended up seeing on Mystery Science Theater before Mystery Science Theater was on. This film really focuses in. I mean, it takes a lot of liberties. It is not it's a biopic, but it's not a documentary. I appreciate that. Like, there are other films that I've seen where they kind of gloss over years and things, and it's almost upsetting. Like, oh my God, there's a huge chunk of time that's missing from this person's life, or what about this thing? What about that thing? And that's when you said the word fanboy, and that's when like the real fanboy comes out, where it's just like, wait a second, what about that other movie that was in between these two? But the plot and the structure of Ed Wood is so strong that they just tell such a great story by focusing in on Glen or Glenda, Bride of the Creature, Bride of the Atom, whatever we're going to call it, and then Plan 9. And it's just such a great story, and it's such a wonderful story to me of friendship and passion and wanting to make art, wanting to be a creator, that I just really fell in love with this film.
And that, for me, is the reason why it resonated so much with my friends and I when we were in high school, because we were all creative types. We were musicians, writers, artists, filmmakers in some respects. And to have someone who's that sort of like blindly naive, doesn't know, what he doesn't know, or he does know that he doesn't know things, and just still plows ahead anyway, was just refreshing. It's a very sort of, I guess, 20-something odd years later, from when this film is set in the 70s, a real DIY punk rock kind of spirit, but it's not an angry spirit. As Johnny Depp said in an interview, that he sort of based the character of Ed, not knowing exactly how he was in the 50s, outside of his performance, obviously, in Glen or Glenda, on Ronald Reagan. He said that he sort of based him on early Ronald Reagan and this real sort of like blind American optimism, that, this sort of can-do spirit. And I think in a way that kind of resonated with us when we were teenagers.
There you go again.
I love his performance in this film. Just that never-ending optimism. Even when the guy is telling him that it's the worst film that he's ever seen, when he shows him Glen or Glenda, and he's just like, all right, next one will be better. That can-do attitude, and you're right, it is that kind of like all-American spirit kind of thing that he's doing, and then mixing that with Johnny Depp and his big goofy smile that he's doing, and that crazy like head shake thing that he's doing throughout the film, which I guess I could see as kind of being Reagan, though I saw Reagan's being almost a little bit more Parkinson's, but just that whole like, when he's trying to decide something and he's kind of going up and down, especially when Loretta King is looking at him, like trying to get the role in Bride of the Atom, and just watching him like making up his mind before he finally starts nodding his head. Those moments are just, they're gold to me. They're better than even the best dialogue in the film, which, to your point, Rob, is just so good and so quotable.
Oh, there's so many lines in here, and to me it's about the friendship among outsiders, because he's sort of the king of the outsiders, and the whole thing of him being able to get these, I guess you would say, like, sexually weird folks for that time, the misunderstood, the misfits. It's sort of the land of misfit toys in a way. He's just got all these weirdos.
No child wants to play with a Charlie in the box.
As the Sarah Jessica Parker character says, you've just surrounded yourself with freaks and weirdos. Of course, they all have a great affinity for a fallen star who's no longer respected by this period in Bela Lugosi, played by Martin-Landau, who does an amazing job in that role. And I have to say that after this film, I went back and I looked at a lot of those 1930s Universal films, because before then it was like, oh yeah, those dusty old things, that really wasn't my cup of tea. I went in and I looked closer at the stuff that he did, and then also the Karloff stuff.
Karloff?
Nothing against Bela, but I have to say that I came to love the Frankenstein monster more than Dracula. Sorry, Bela.
Fuck you! Karloff does not deserve to smell my shit! How dare that asshole bring up Karloff? You think it takes talent to play Frankenstein? It's all makeup and then grunting.
Bella, I agree 100%.
Yeah, and then I learned, which they don't really bring up in here that much, is the fact that he was offered that role. He was. They did makeup tests with Lugosi, but decided to go with Karloff instead. So, sorry you did not get to play both Dracula and Frankenstein's monster, sir. Rest in peace.
That would have been crazy. That would have been like playing, I don't know, Johnny Storm and Captain America. It just can't be done. Yeah, I love Sarah Jessica Parker in here when she does that. I mean, this is probably my favorite Sarah Jessica Parker role. She just plays it so well, and I actually can really empathize with her in this role. This whole idea of, finding out that Ed is a transvestite by giving her the script to read. I like how easily Kathy O'Hara, who eventually becomes Kathy Wood, accepts the idea of Ed being a transvestite. But I can definitely empathize with Dolores Fuller as far as, kind of being upset about it, especially with all of her missing clothes and everything. And she's not part of that clique. And when she does kind of finally burst out and call them all a bunch of freaks and weirdos, I don't necessarily empathize with her at that point, but I can kind of understand where she's coming from because he has built that land of misfit toys. But it's so great to watch them, and it's so great to see them interacting, and especially when Ed is there and you've got the Corla Pandit music going and Ed is dancing in drag, and everybody is all about it. I thought maybe Bela would not necessarily accept it, or maybe Tor Johnson, but everybody is just all on the same wavelength. They're all a bunch of misfits, and he really has gathered them together and created a family.
I love the moment where Bill Murray comes up next to her and puts his hand on her shoulder, and then realizes that, she doesn't look like she's ready for this yet. Yeah, it's I don't know, uncomfortable, awkward. Working in like indie film, as I do occasionally, like that's kind of my nightmare, that somebody close to me is going to freak out in that way.
Well, and that's a nice little moment too when Tor Johnson comes up to Bunny Breckenridge, and he's just like, I thought you were going to be a lady, and there's just that nice exchange between those two characters because Tor could maybe not accept this. This doesn't fly in Sweden, but he seems comfortable with everything, and he just fits in with that. And I love that. I mean, the scene where they're all really working together and going out and stealing that octopus for Bride of the Monster, that's one of my favorite bits as well, just to see those guys all working towards a common goal. When that moment that you're talking about, Rob, when Bela talks about how he could have been Frankenstein, and he's there in the cold and fighting the octopus and everything, and just what's supposed to be a lake, and it just looks like a puddle. I mean, just so many great moments in this thing, and all of these things just kind of all around filmmaking as well, and just everybody pitching in, trying to help Eddie realize his vision. What a skewed vision it is, but it works. And I'll tell you that I love the films. I love Plan 9. I've seen it so many times now, and there is that sincerity behind it. And now I picture Johnny Depp as Ed Wood, trying his best to make these things work, even though it just feels like he's pretending to be a director throughout so much of this film.
Well, the other thing that was surprising to me to listen to the commentary track with the writers, that it's basically the first draft of the screenplay with a few things left out. And I mean, can you think of any other movies that have basically shot the first draft? Or
they printed the screenplay in is it Faber and Faber, I think, the publisher, and they just do a little notation when there's something that's not in the script, or when they've made a change between script and final film. And there are so few notes, and it's mostly just little deletions, like a line here, a line there. The one thing I found interesting, though, that they did delete was any time that Eddie was drinking. And I think that came from the way that Johnny Depp and Tim Burton kind of fell in love with the Ed Wood character, and they didn't want to have that negative part of him. So they just kind of eliminated all those times when he was drinking, and we get to see that kind of darker side of Ed. Instead, he maintains that optimism through the whole film, and there isn't that other side, the darker side of his character.
Well, I mean, the only sort of like other side or darker side is him concealing the the history of the fact that he likes the Angora sweaters from his girlfriend. And then there's this constant compare with Orson Welles. He keeps bringing up Orson Welles, which I think is a nice a nice comparable. I don't believe it was in the original book that I read that he had an obsession with Orson Welles, but it kind of works in terms of the idea of someone who comes out of the gate, makes one first film, and it's such a monumental thing and had a big impact. There are these moments of just sort of crushing doubt where he's like, he's trying to keep up the facade of optimism, but there's, in his times when he's alone or with his girlfriend, he's like, I don't know, what am I, am I wasting my time, or, am I doing this right? Or, there's scenes, like where he's in the bar and he's just sort of sitting there drinking and happens to look out the window and see something. So it's little quiet moments like that where you get that there is something else going on, inside, but it's not played up. Is heavy, and it's not as dark as it would have been as if he would have been a boozer. And from what I remember in the original book that I read, I don't know if he was as heavy of a drunk now as he was past Plan 9. It seems like as the 60s and then in the 70s, it really got bad.
Are you talking about Nightmare in Ecstasy by Rudolph Gray?
Yeah, which I don't believe is listed in the credits, but I read that book after I saw this film because I went and sought it out, and it's a great sort of like Please Kill Me style oral history with all the people that he was able to interview to put together the story of who Ed Wood was and, what his films were about and stuff like that. And went more in depth and, like we were talking about, his struggles, his psychological struggles, his drinking and all of that stuff is definitely in that book.
Yeah, and that was where I really first learned about the later films that Ed would make. Some of the roughies and the outright porn that he would go into. And I don't know if that's where, because I had been a fan of Orgy of the Dead when I was in high school. So I think that's where I learned that he had been a writer, but I think I learned more about his writing career, writing of paperbacks, that is, through the Rudolph Gray book, which, yeah, it's a terrific book. If folks haven't read Nightmare in Ecstasy, it is an absolutely wonderful read. And I think that's also where the whole idea of Bela Lugosi's swearing comes from, is that the person who is telling a lot of the stories about Bela Lugosi liked to swear. That is, the person who is telling the stories would swear, and then that kind of got translated into Bela saying swear words. So I know people were kind of upset by Bela Lugosi dropping a lot of F-bombs, but I found that to be absolutely wonderful, and I just really appreciated, Rob, you mentioned the performance by Martin-Landau. So good. This really, one of the few times where I could just agree with the Oscars 100%. Especially like when they would show the Oscar clip and it's him doing the whole I have no home speech. That still gives me shivers today. And that was dialogue that Ed Wood wrote all those years ago. It's like, yeah, that actually is pretty powerful.
Home. I have no home. Hunted. Despised. Living like an animal. The jungle is my home. That I will show the world that I can be its master. I will perfect my own race of people. A race of atomic supermen which will conquer the world.
When you have a good actor, they can deliver the back of a cereal box for you, and I think that proves out in terms of Landau. Of course, they did some makeup on him, and it worked out. I also think that his daughter gives a really good performance, Juliet Landau, and she has one of the weirdest lines I've ever heard a character say.
Hi, would you like some water?
No. No water. No liquids. I'm terribly allergic to them.
Oddly enough, that's one of the lines that I still quote today. I shouldn't, there's really no good place to quote it, but I definitely still find myself saying that.
Yeah, those who would know would get it, but those who wouldn't would look at you like you're from another planet.
And can we talk about Mike Starr's appearance in here as Georgie, the film producer? Talk about another just series of quotable lines.
Well, not only that, but I think it was around this time that I got into Mystery Science Theater. And I believe that there was a George Weiss film that was on Mystery Science Theater. So I think I had seen his name on a film before I saw this movie. So to learn more about him was kind of fascinating in both the book and then Mike Starr's portrayal in here. And I think he does an amazing job with the limited amount of time that he has. I remember there was a scene that was cut down in there featuring him that, as you were talking about, from the original draft of the script, they trimmed him down just a tad. Mm-hmm. But I thought he did just an amazing job. And we used to do that dialogue back and forth between him and Ed where he's like, so you think doing that, like to dress in women's clothes makes you competent to make my movie, huh?
Hi, can I help you?
Yes, I'm Ed Wood. I'm here about directing the Christine Jorgensen picture.
Well, a couple of things have changed. It ain't gonna be the Christine Jorgensen story no more. Goddamn Variety had to print the story before I got the rights. Now that bitch is asking for the sky.
Oh, you're not gonna make the movie.
No, of course I'm gonna make the picture. I already pre-sold Alabama and Oklahoma.
Is there a script?
Fuck no. But there's a poster. It opens in 9 weeks in Tulsa. Those were pressed opens. They go for that twisted, perverted stuff.
I have friends from Oklahoma, so I'll often say that to them. I'm like, you Okies, you go for that twisted, perverted stuff.
And believe it or not, that whole, the whole, we have a poster thing still, their studio's still using that as an impetus to make a movie today. I'm looking in the direction of the Asylum.
The Asylum, all the Charles Band stuff. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe every once in a while Lloyd Kaufman uses a poster to come up with an idea.
Well, go look at, what was it, Electric Boogaloo, the story of Canon Films, and I think there was a couple in there where they had the poster before they had the script or anything.
There's a whole series of, what if type posters where it's like, oh, wow, what would this have been? The one performance that people don't talk about that much that I found to be, you couldn't get any better than this, is George the Animal Steele as Tor Johnson. The guy is almost a dead ringer for Tor Johnson, especially when he's got his contacts in and he's rising from the grave in the Plan 9 sequences. I mean, it was uncanny to see him. And I loved me some George the Animal Steele back in the day watching wrestling in the early probably early mid 80s and seeing him eating the turnbuckles and all that kind of stuff. And then when he showed up in Ed Wood, I was just like, oh my God, is that wrestler guy? I mean, it makes sense that he's a wrestler. And then to see his hairy back in the meet cute that they do, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then once he started being Tor Johnson, I was like, oh, wow, yeah. Like when he was in his Lobo gear. And again, thanks to Mystery Science Theater, that's where I was seeing Bride of the Creature when I finally got around to it. It's funny, I think I saw almost all the Ed Wood movies other than the 3 that they talk about in this film. Not all the Ed Wood movies, but the filler ones, the ones that they don't talk about. So I saw those, but I wasn't familiar with the big canon ones other than Plan 9.
And little nod to the local boy, George the Animal Steele, originally from here. He played football and also taught wrestling in Madison Heights.
I tried to get a hold of George the Animal Steele. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to. And I even tried to play up that Detroit angle, but no bites. His Facebook page is pretty interesting, I have to say. I think George has become very religious in his later years.
As they sometimes do.
Got to get right with God before you die.
I think this film also, because of the time in which I saw it, it made me go back and look up Christine Jorgensen, because they're obviously Glenn or Glenda was supposed to be the Christine Jorgensen story. And then, as Mike Starr's character points out, Christine Jorgensen backed out, started asking for more money than he was willing to give, and therefore he just tried to fictionalize it, which obviously didn't work for Glenn or Glenda. But made me go back and look at that and all of the sort of celebrity around Christine Jorgensen, which I think even by today's standards, most people would go, really? Like, wow, like back in the 50s, they made a big deal about someone who was one of the first people to have male to female operation and all of that, and they were actually, given time on the big talk shows and were kind of treated with respect and treated like a celebrity. I think most people would be kind of amazed to hear that, because when we think of the 1950s, of course, it is a very conservative time, but I guess maybe there was a certain level of, maybe curiosity / respect for this former soldier who felt that she was always a woman.
Well, yeah, and then I know when we were talking about Homicidal, that there were kind of veiled references to Christine Jorgensen as well, and that was so many years earlier, and I don't think that she actually finally got a film called The Christine Jorgensen Story until 1970, so it's funny that there were so many years between Glenn or Glenda and then that one, but then, yeah, there were all these kind of more fictionalized accounts. I want to say Roberta Findlay did another one as well, but I can't be sure. But I'm sure that was a rich vein to mine for a little bit when it came to exploitation.
This theater will present an extraordinary movie, a motion picture that deals with the last sexual mystery. But it is much more than a motion picture. There are no actors or actresses in it. There are just real people. And what they do, and how they feel, and what happens to them in this all-real sexual adventure, you will remember all your life.
Last year, I was a man.
So do you think that this was kind of the start of Bill Murray 2.0? It seemed like after this movie, he started, taking on more interesting roles or things that you necessarily wouldn't think of him for.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when, because really it was when he got in with Wes Anderson. That seemed to be the start of that for me, but this might have been kind of a precursor.
Or like just kind of dipping his toe in the water to test it out.
Yeah, I mean, he had done some interesting work. We talked a lot about him on our, both on Hunter S. Thompson episode. We talked about his When Where the Buffalo Roam, and then also in Nothing Lasts Forever. But yeah, he seemed to be doing the more straight ahead comic stuff for a while. But yeah, it was a very interesting choice to have Bill Murray in here, and it was very unexpected. And to the point where I forgot that he was in the film until I went back a few months ago and rewatched it again for the show, and I was just like, oh yeah, I forgot about him as Bunny. He is wonderful in that role, and he has some of the biggest laugh lines in the film. I mean, especially during the church scene when they're about to get baptized so they can get money to fund a film. And they've got, the famous story of Ed's wife's chiropractor portraying the dead Bela Lugosi in Plan 9 from Outer Space. And when he's there in the church and covering his eyes and doing a really bad Bela Lugosi impersonation, and when Bunny says,
"Let's hear you call Boris Karloff a cocksucker."
The other one, and this is much more sad because of how he ended up in legal trouble because of his predilection, I guess. Jeffrey Jones as Criswell is really good in here. And, I had loved him in films. I mean, I talked to you before, Mike, about how Ferris Bueller's Day Off was like on a loop when I was a kid in my house on VHS. So, I mean, I grew up with him as the principal, going after him. But whenever he would show up in things, I always liked him, and he does a really good job in here as Criswell. And I don't necessarily know if the real Criswell, because I haven't read up too much on him, understood that he was a scammer and he was just playing, the show, or if he actually believed some of the nonsense that came out of his mouth.
I know that he definitely sold that stuff very well. There were the prediction, I want to say he did a prediction book, and I don't think that there was an album, but for some reason I want to say there was. But he was a brand name, which is kind of funny that he could be a guest on Carson and do all this stuff. And it's I don't know if he knew what he was shoveling.
A Happy New Year to you, Criswell. It is a great honor again to be with
you and all of your friends on New Year's Eve of 1965. And I'd like to say greetings, my friend. We are all interested in the future, for that is where you and I are going to spend the rest of our lives, whether we want to or not.
Well, you can't argue with that.
My first prediction is that I predict that the year of 1966 will be a year of tricks, deceit, and deception. 1966. I predict a family coat of arms will be the new fad in America. Yes, a new family American pride in your own personal family right here in America, and the family coat of arms will be your number one fad for 1966.
That's interesting. You have a coat of arms?
No, I have one. I'm not aware of it. But I'm going to get one tomorrow.
It's better if you want to, come out right.
I would prefer if he was the way that Jeffrey Jones portrayed him as. Jeffrey Jones definitely a much better actor than Criswell. We talked on the Orgy of the Dead episode about how you can see Criswell reading lines from cue cards when he's doing his opening speech. It looks like he's 3 sheets to the wind a lot of times. But then again, that was the later Criswell. That was the, more towards the 70s type Criswell. But he still had a lot of years to go before he shuffled off this mortal coil or went to another dimension, as the film says.
The other character that shows up in here, because this is interesting because there are like all of these sort of like indie characters. You know what I mean by that? I mean, they were important in their era. They were known in their era, like Criswell. And like, I guess Christine Jorgensen kind of plays in the background to a certain extent. But the other one is Vampira. And specifically, if you were in Los Angeles, you would have known who Vampira was in the 1950s, which, obviously became picked up by Cassandra Peterson and became Elvira to a certain extent, much more punk rock version, much like the difference between Ghoulardi and the Ghoul. For us Detroiters, Clevelanders who remember show hosts. But just to have her in here as well, and then obviously her role in Plan 9, it's kind of fun to have that as well.
Well, and I really liked Lisa Marie quite a bit. I liked when they were dating, when she and Tim Burton were dating, because then she got to show up in Mars Attacks, and probably one of my favorite roles in the film, and definitely one of my favorite outfits. And then her, even in Sleepy Hollow, I thought she was very easy on the eyes, and I thought she was a great actress. I thought she played a really good part as Vampira, and I love that she played it as kind of this sympathetic, kind of bitchy. The way that she was doing the horror host stuff, I thought was good, just that really acerbic kind of stuff. And I watched a documentary. Unfortunately, I watched the wrong one. Apparently, there have been a few documentaries about Vampira, and I watched the bad one, which was Vampira the movie from 2006. Apparently, there's another one called Vampira and Me from 2013 that's a lot better. But I will say to stay away from Vampira the movie 2006, especially because in the opening few minutes where they're interviewing Vampira, she just comes across as such a kook. It's like, yeah, I don't really know if I want to spend 90 minutes with this person. And then just the quality of the actual filmmaking itself was like, yeah, and like the dime store reenactments of things. It's like, yeah, can we get some archival footage in here or something?
Yeah. The problem is that she was in the era of kinescopes, and I believe that from what I've seen, there's only a few minutes of that stuff left. So I think I saw a bit of one of her intros once in a documentary, and that's it. It's kind of the same thing with Ghoulardi, which is around the early 60s. That stuff was like before the dawn of videotape, so they only had like really shitty 16mm footage of that stuff, if anyone saved it. I think it's kind of a good choice to end it where they end it, because as we talked about, if you read the Rudolph Gray book, Nightmare of Ecstasy, it really falls apart after Plan 9 for him. Maybe the last great thing that he did is Orgy of the Dead, which he didn't even direct, he wrote and all that stuff, but after that, it's just, like you were saying, hardcore and roughies and drinking and cheap dime store porn novels and all of that stuff, which I'm sure is fascinating, but doesn't necessarily make him out to be a hero in the end.
You mentioned the Orson Welles bit, and I have to say that I love the Orson Welles scene. You know, it is such a great moment in the film. And I love that Maurice LaMarche is doing the Orson Welles voice, because he does that so well. And he had done it so well as the Brain on Pinky and the Brain. And now, though, when I see it, because when I saw it the first time with Vincent D'Onofrio and the voice, for some reason, when I saw it theatrically, it didn't ring false to me. And now when I watch it and I hear the Brain's voice coming out of him, I'm just like, yeah, that really just doesn't work. I wonder what D'Onofrio's real voice would have sounded like in that situation.
See, I thought D'Onofrio played Orson Welles at one point, or am I getting?
I think he did.
Or am I getting confused with someone else? Because I think when I want to say that he played Welles in Cradle Will Rock, but I don't know if that's true or not, or if it's an implanted memory. I'm sure someone can look it up on IMDb.
I know what it was, Rob. He was in a short called 5 Minutes, Mr. Wells, where it was just a real quick short film, and he was talking, I can't remember what it was, but it was right before he was supposed to go on to a performance, and it was kind of one of these like backstage, and he's talking about where things are at with his career. So it was almost like Ed Wood, where he was talking about, they want me to use Charlton Heston as a Mexican, but it was a slightly different point in his career.
Which I absolutely love that line, because I think it was a few years later that they did the recut of Touch of Evil. And then I got to see the recut of Touch of Evil, and I kind of laughed because, yeah, they did want him to use Charlton Heston as a Mexican, but it actually worked out pretty well. I think Touch of Evil's pretty good.
Yeah, and if memory serves, Charlton Heston became one of Wells's big supporters towards the end of his life. He was really like fighting for him, but I could be wrong about that, so don't quote me. Please, whatever you do, don't quote me.
We know a remote farm in Lincolnshire where Mrs. Buckley lives. Every July, peas grow there. Do you really mean that?
Yeah, but if you could start a half second later.
Don't you think you really want to say July over the snow? Isn't that the fun of it? I think it's so nice that you see a snow-covered field and say every July peas grow there. We're talking about them growing and she's picked them.
Well, we want to be out of that snowy field.
But I was out. We were on to a can of peas, a big dish of peas when I said in July.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, always. I'm always past that.
You are?
Yes.
Can you emphasize a bit in July?
Why? That doesn't make any sense. Sorry. There's no known way of saying an English sentence in which you begin a sentence with in and emphasize it. Get me a jury and show me how you can say in July and I'll make cheese for you. That's just idiotic, if you'll forgive my saying so. That's just stupid. In July. Impossible. Meaningless.
And the funniest line, though, to me, has to be when they're reading the review of Ed's play at the very beginning of the film, and Sarah Jessica Parker asks,
"Do I really have a face like a horse?"
And then I just kind of move on. And then the other one is, he said that the costumes are very realistic. See, that's positive. So he's just constantly trying to find the positivity in the review.
Oh, yeah. And then later on when he's talking to Georgie and he says, it was praised for its realism.
I had to go and look up the definition of ostentatious after that first scene. Well, if we're talking about cast members, the cameraman I love that guy. Voice of Aquaman on Super Friends and the Back to the Future bartender guy. And I love the colorblind line.
Eddie?
Yes?
Which dress do you like better?
I don't know. Say, Bill, which dress works better for you, the red one or the green one?
Which one is the red one?
What do you mean?
I mean, I can't see the difference. I'm colorblind. But I kind of like the dark gray one.
And really, I don't know if being colorblind helps to shoot in black and white or not, but I still have always found that line hilarious.
It took me so long to figure out who the doctor who's helping out Bela at the institute, who he was, because every time he spoke, I was like, I know that voice. I know that voice. Where do I know that voice? Finally today, I looked him up, and I didn't realize that he was the guy who's selling Quaid on the trip to Mars through Recall. So he's the guy who's like, he's the guy who's like, what's the same thing about every vacation? It's you. So yeah, that guy's Ray Baker. So I was very happy to finally figure that out because, like I said, his voice was just driving me nuts.
He always reminded me of one of the Animal House guys, one of the fraternity guys, and I thought maybe that's where I'd seen him, but I never bothered to look it up and check.
And then I was very glad, too, the guy that plays Conrad Brooks, Brent Hinckley, I finally looked him up, too, because I was just like, man, that guy's familiar. Where do I know him from? Well, I've only seen him about 300 times because he's one of the policemen at that place where they're keeping Hannibal Lecter in the big cage. He's one of those policemen, and he's got some good lines, like before Starling goes up to see Hannibal Lecter again. And he's the guy who has to talk to Bill Pembrake, who just had his face ripped off. So, God damn it, that's Bill Pembrake. You talk to him. So,
wow.
Rich with character actors in this film.
There's nobody that I think is dead weight in this movie, really.
No, there's not even any lines where I cringe when I hear them. I've only seen this film, a couple dozen times, and by that time, you come up with oh man, that one just doesn't ring true. But every single line just hits in this film for me. Speaking of good lines, we're going to take a break and play back some interviews. The first one is with Larry-Karaszewski, who co-wrote the screenplay of Ed Wood. The second one is with Lydia Kavina, who played some of the music. She was the theremin player on the soundtrack. We'll also hear again from our good friend Mike Starr, who played Georgie. And then we'll hear from Andrew-j-Rausch, who is one of the co-writers of a book about Ed Wood that I highly recommend. Now, you will hear those after these brief messages.
Let me ask you a question. Are you getting enough? I bet you'd love more, right? Well, AdamandEve.com wants to give you more with 10 free gifts. First, you'll get a sexy surprise for her. Second, a specially selected toy for him. And third, a little something we know you'll both enjoy. Plus, you'll get 6 full-length adult movies on DVD. And number 10, free shipping on your entire order. So what do you have to do to get your 10 free gifts? It's not hard. Just go to adamandeve.com and select any one item. It could be an adventurous new toy, sexy piece of lingerie, or anything you desire. Just enter offer code BOOTH at checkout, and you'll get all 10 free gifts. Go check out adamandeve.com today. Select one item and get 10 free gifts, including free shipping when you enter offer code BOOTH. That's BOOTH at adamandeve.com.
Movies need only 3 things. Badasses.
You tell me who you want done, and I'll do the hell out of it.
A chick with drive who don't take no jive.
Boobs.
Do you know that the female breast, known to be the source of life since Eve, can be deadly weapons?
And body counts.
Body count. The mathematics of murder and menace.
The BB&BC podcast discusses lesser-known action, exploitation, and horror cult cinema. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher Smart Radio, and SoundCloud by searching for BB&BC Podcast. You can also listen to each episode directly on the show's website at badassesboobsandbodycounts.com.
Got the goddamn message? Let's go to work.
Hey fans, this is Reverend Scott. Just want to tell you about Outside the Cinema. Great company. They review cult films, any cult film, every cult film. And it's something you should tune into. So if you get a chance, go to the website, look these guys up, Outside the Cinema, and find out what the hot cult films are today, what's going on. These guys are right on the cutting edge of reviewing cult movies. And if you're a cult member, or you want to be a cult member, you're thinking about being a cult member, your mom's a cult member, your dad's a cult member, your damn mother-in-law's a cult member, tune in to Outside the Cinema, baby, and you'll find out what's going on. Reverend Scott, and that's out.
This is Adam Spiegelman, the host of my second favorite movie podcast called Proudly Resent at proudlyresents.com. And you are listening to my favorite, the number one, The Projection Booth. Mike put so much work into it. If you listen to my show, I put no work into it. Enjoy the rest of the show, you lucky son of a gun.
How did you get into writing?
I was always interested in film. I grew up in South Bend, Indiana. My mother was a waitress. My dad worked in a factory, so it wasn't really any kind of real connection to film. Early on, my parents got divorced. My dad had me like one night a week, and he really didn't know what to do with a kid. And we would sort of go. I would talk him into taking me to the drive-in or the grindhouse, and he would drink a little beer and fall asleep, and I would watch just all the nuttiness of the cinema of the 1970s, and became completely addicted. So I just love film from a very, very early age. And the thing about writing is it's the one thing you don't necessarily need permission to do. If you want to make a feature film, you have to find somebody who will give you the money to make a feature film. Writing, you just need a blank piece of paper. I managed to get myself, I was a very young filmmaker. I had a Super 8 camera and all that kind of stuff, and I became just kind of obsessed with making little movies, and I hooked up with a television series that was in the area called Beyond Our Control, which was a half-hour sketch comedy show. And really, back when that didn't occur, it actually was, the show started before Saturday Night Live or Second City TV, but it was very much in that vein. And it was run by high school students. Initially started as like a bit of a community outreach kind of a achievement program, but wound up taking on much, much more, becoming quite a little phenomenon. It won a Peabody, it won the Chicago International Film Festival, and it was a weekly half-hour TV show and run by high school students, and it essentially holds up really well. But the bunch of people came out of it. Myself, Daniel Waters, who wrote Heathers and Batman Returns, Dean Norris, who was on Breaking Bad as Hank, Chris Webb, who wrote Toy Story 2, Dave Simpkins, who wrote Adventures in Babysitting, the couple that invented Blue's Clues. So there was a lot of people out there who did amazing work back in small towns who managed to, basically because we were taught very early to be professional. It was one of those things where I barely even think of myself as going to high school as much as my high school experience was this television show. And we would write on Monday and Tuesday, cast on Wednesday, rewrite on Thursday, build on Friday, shoot on Saturday, and it would air on Sunday afternoon.
And this was high school students doing this?
Yes, it is.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's very fun. It was still pretty funny. It had a great premise, which was, it's called Beyond Our Control, and basically it was someone that's taking over your TV for a half hour. The death of sketch comedy is sketches that go on too long, or, like the way SNL has to have when they do a sketch, it really has to fit an entire commercial between two commercial breaks. So it's this gigantic, lumbering thing. And the format of Beyond Our Control was, we called it channel switching. You would write a sketch, but the second the sketch got boring, it was like someone turned the channel and you went to a different sketch, and then you'd come back to that sketch later, you come back and you go to little commercial parodies, and you go back. And so it was this very kinetic kind of thing. And so if you had a sketch that was only, say, a minute and a half, but there were 3 extra good jokes, you could actually film the minute and a half sketch and then just do the 2 or 3 extra jokes as little bits. And later, so you would lace that through the entire show as if you were just a guy on a couch clicking the channels and you went past it again.
Sounds very Robot Chicken.
Yes, sure. Yeah, that's very much of that mindset. It was part of I think it's one of the reasons I really enjoyed writing Man on the Moon was that in the 1970s, there's something a lot of people kind of forget, comedy was considered a little revolutionary. There was, right now there's just so much comedy everywhere, comedy news, comedy, everything, there's such an industry. But back then, comedy was Johnny Carson and Bob Hope and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden became these young guys who sort of turned it on its head, and there was, a mixture of Fat and Gorilla Theater, and so it really felt, there was a reason why SNL was such a sensation when it happened. There was a reason why Pryor and Steve Martin as stand-ups were such revolutionary figures because they so comedy felt like a weird ground zero kind of thing where, like, that's why Andy Kaufman meant a lot because it was like, it really was performance art. It wasn't just joke.
What made you decide to move out to Hollywood and start writing there?
Isn't that what a young man from Indiana was supposed to do? That was really it. Knowing my family went to college, so I actually didn't go to college at first. I got a job being a film critic for the NBC affiliate back in Indiana, and so I took a year off and just sort of like did the weekly, Saturday and Sunday late night news, on a film critic, wanting to be a little bit of a. Growing up in South Indiana was very close to Chicago, and the influence of Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel was gigantic. I mean, they were just so huge in that area that you'd go to a movie marquee and it would have the name of the film, but rather than the name of the actors on the marquee, it would say the name of the film in Siskel, 3.5 stars. And that was also the year of Pauline Kael and things like that. So being a film critic, I thought was quite interesting, and I'm a big lover of film. So I was a film critic for a bit, and then I sort of just knew that I had to get out of Indiana, and I was really just threw it up to the fates. I basically applied to USC Film School, and if I didn't get into USC Film School, I was going to audition for Second City in Chicago, and I got into USC Film School, so I came out here. And Scott Alexander was my freshman roommate. We wound up writing a script while we were in college, and it sold for a lot of money, and all of a sudden we had an office at 20th Century Fox, and that movie never got made, but we basically became a writing partnership that's lasted now close to 30 years.
I'm always curious about writing partnerships, how that works. How do you guys kind of break down stuff?
We do it in the room and together. It's not like it's a true partnership. It's not, you write the first act, I'll write the second act, and we'll meet back up in June. But I describe it best to just say to someone, go watch an old episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show. One person is at the computer or typewriter, one person paces around the room, and it's definitely the old-fashioned way of comedy writing, where comedy writers tend to write in groups, which is what I didn't get under control, because if you throw out a line and people laugh in the room, there's kind of no denying it. So you know that it's working. Where Scott and I just have a very painstaking process where he sits behind a computer. He's a master of the script page as architecture, very influenced by a teacher named Jim Boyle, who was quite influential in Scott in terms of like having a script page. Every character turn means something as opposed to just fulfilling time by writing and writing and writing. So yeah, comedy writing basically lets people sit in the room and you go back and forth. And I think it's helped us a great deal in that I think our scripts have a bit of off-center, weird originality to them. And part of that is Scott will throw out a line and I want to say I like it, and I'll throw out a line and he won't like it, and then we're both mad at each other and we throw out a couple more lines and no, those lines are good. And so by the time we actually agree on a line, it's the 10th or 15th line that we've argued about, and so that becomes kind of like if you're going that deep, it's kind of going to be. It's either really not going to work or it's going to be kind of original, and hopefully we lean towards the original part, and that's our process.
Now, I know you didn't necessarily have the best experience in the world with Problem Child, but can you tell me, what was the original script supposed to be like with that?
Problem Child initially was a reaction to, there was a genre at the time. Genres have stages, classic stages, postmodern stages, all that kind of stuff. And at the time, there was this genre of yuppies with a baby. Yuppies who get who get taught, don't worry about your job so much. You actually should spend your time with your children. It was like Baby Boom and 3 Men and a Baby or 3 Men and a Cradle, whatever it was called. She's having a baby. There were a lot of these films. And we sort of had the idea to, flip it on its head. You can sort of see this happening right now with superhero genre where, it's taking a long time for superhero genre to get to the postmodern phase, but with Deadpool, they're trying to say, all right, you guys, the tropes. We're gonna turn them on its ear. So we're gonna make a baby coming into these people's lives into a friggin' nightmare. That's how that project got made. You know, looking at what the studio wanted was another nice kid-friendly movie, and they were, you know, financially they were absolutely correct in that it's hard to do a parody of a family film because as a general, the poster is always going to feel somewhat like a family film. So, you know, whatever. On our first test screening at the Problem Shop, we had this, like, you know, mothers coming over and, you know, just screaming and yelling, you know, how inappropriate it was. So, you know, and that's what I think, but that's also what makes those two Problem Child movies stand out. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, we had misgivings about a lot of it, but 20-some years later, or whatever it is now, people who were 9 and 10 years old when that movie came out are now studio executives, are now running, you know, the Cinema Family or you know, places like that. And we've come to terms with it, where people come up to us and say, like, oh, I was a messed up little kid, and that, like, it's sort of a punk aesthetic for little kids, and that I'm sort of proud of.
It's amazing. I didn't realize what a phenomenon it was. I knew of the sequel, but I didn't know about Problem Child 3 or the TV show.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Problem Child 2. I think Brian Levant actually did a really good job of directing that movie. And but the longer it went on, the less it's you know. And whatever, there was a television remake last year. Someone NBC tried to revive it as a sitcom. We had absolutely nothing to do with it. I never saw it. But and Matthew Lillard was the John Ritter part.
I can see him doing that.
Yeah.
When you were growing up and seeing all these movies at the drive-in or Indiana's Grindhouse, those kind of things, what were some of your favorites?
Well, that's one of the reasons I do that website, Trailers from Hell, because that, you know, all you really got to do is pop over there to trailersfromhell.com. It's a website run by Joe Dante, and it's filmmakers like myself and Edgar Wright, Guillermo del Toro, John Landis, Josh Olson, this sort of interesting filmmakers who sort of grab on to films that sort of are a little off the beaten track and mean something to them. Funny, I was talking to Tarantino during the release of Hateful Eight, and we both were sharing the sort of early 70s experience of going to double bills of movies that have nothing to do with each other. Like, usually there's some kind of weird, you know, theme to double bills. Nowadays they don't even have double bills. But you would go, you know, I saw Pontecorvo's Burn with Marlon Brando, probably on the same night I saw Last House on the Left or something like that, you know, or The Sterile Cuckoo, you know, and Tarantino and I both have an affection for a movie called Joe. I think he saw Joe on a double bill with Where's Papa? Well, you know, and that thing said it all there, is that, you know, both Quentin and I at age 9 or 8 or 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever we were at the time, were, you know, being somehow taken to see a double bill of Joe and Where's Papa. That's like, you know, that's amazing. I think that's why we turned out the way we did. Which is I'm making a joke there, but I'm actually being serious too at the same time. I think a lot of it is I'm a big fan of showing children sort of age-inappropriate material. It sounds crazy to say this, but when I was a kid, there were only 3 networks. So you had to watch whatever was on. And that was an episode of Mannix or an episode of whatever, or some movie that, you know, was on TV. And you'd watch it, and sure, it wasn't aimed directly at you. It was kind of boring. It was kind of like, you know, it wasn't, but you had to sit there and be patient, and then occasionally you were rewarded with what the hell was that? Wow. Whoa, my God. And then you learn that, you know, right now with the multitude of channels, people just put their kids in front of Nickelodeon or Disney, and there's nothing wrong with those networks, but that's the entire intake. They're never asked to stretch that muscle. So it becomes like, you know, you're never asked to, like, all right, chill for a second. This is gonna, you know, you have to you have to figure something out. And I thought that was very important to me growing up, was learning that lesson. Like the movie that really influenced me as a young person. The first film I ever saw that I sort of, I always knew there was a director and a writer and that kind of stuff, but when I saw the film The Conversation, Francis Coppola movie, it was a movie that I really, to me said, wait a second, there is someone telling this story. there's somebody who, this is being, this is not just someone just, here's a tale. It's like, no, there's a director, there's a sound person, there are people who is an intelligent mind orchestrating this, and that was a huge, impact on me.
Now, over the years, you've kind of become known as writing films about real people. Not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily call them biopics, but they are definitely based on some real folks.
Yeah, right.
Ed Wood being one of the first one of those. How have you kind of taken that challenge on?
Well, I think we sort of, as we became successful writers, it was the 70s were long over. So it was a much harder time to get interesting, off-the-wall projects made through the studio system. And I think what we discovered was the true story. I wouldn't call it a Trojan horse, but close to it, in the sense that they were still willing to take a chance on Life is Stranger Than Fiction kind of stories. That those still resonated with audiences a bit, and also with awards. Actors want to play these things. I mean, I'm saying maybe it's much more calculated than it was. I mean, Ed Wood came first. Ed Wood was just a reaction to us being labeled the problem child guys, and us only being able to get jobs that were movies about little kids who farted. And we were like, that's not the kind of writers we are. Maybe we should go write that sort of indie movie that means something to us. That maybe we started our career in the wrong way. And so, we had always talked about doing a movie about Ed Wood, but at this point we sort of felt we had nothing to lose, and we also looked at Ed Wood in a different way, because Problem Child was savaged by the critics, and people, and so we sort of knew that it's not that easy to make a good movie. Instead of making fun of Ed for making bad movies, we sort of said, well, if you look at him sympathetically. And so we wrote this script on spec that was really, about that, celebrated his passion. We celebrated, by examining the worst, you were able to really look at what it takes to make a film and go through all the various process. And when that movie, the script was embraced by Tim Burton, and he directed it, and it came out, and Martin-Landau won an Oscar, and won other Oscars, and it wasn't a financial success, but it put us on the map, and I think in a very similar way to, we recognized that as a problem child, people said, oh, you're the problem child guys, you were only write this. We sort of stepped back and said, wait a second, what about the biographical film? This is a genre, like even you condescendingly said, I wouldn't call them biopics, because you think by saying, oh, they're biopics, for some reason that's terrible. When you think of biopic, you think of that 3-hour stuffy thing about the great man who does this and then dies, and a guy in old age makeup telling the story, and we recognize it as a genre that just needed to have a bomb thrown in the room. And by using Ed Wood as a template, we sort of invented what we call the anti-great man biopic, a biopic for someone who doesn't deserve a biopic in the traditional sense. But what we found was that these type of stories actually made for great cinema, and that they were about nothing but conflict. By picking someone who is sort of more outside of society, who has perhaps questionable motives or questionable goals, all of a sudden you start like thinking, wait a second, what? How do I feel about this? I'm very proud of a movie we made a year ago called Big Eyes, also with Tim Burton, also examining someone that an artist that many people poo-poo critically, but I do feel like actually looking at someone that is so put down by the critics, you're able to discuss art issues that a regular movie about Picasso would never discuss. I mean, there's so much art theory dialogue in Big Eye, so much discussion of just the commerce angle of the art world. You would never get that if you were just making a regular straight lust for life kind of biopic. Same goes for Ed Wood. I mean, there's so many filmmakers come to me and say that they think it's one of the best films about filmmaking, because everyone realizes they're just one film away from being Ed Wood, and that's also why we added that scene at the end. We try to be very truthful in our biopics and not stray from things that didn't happen. We put our spin on it, of course, but we had a scene at the end of Ed Wood where Ed meets Orson Welles, and Ed was obsessed with Welles, But we sort of thought, what would happen if the quote-unquote worst filmmaker of all time met the quote-unquote best filmmaker of all time? What would be their discussion? What would they talk about? And then we realized they sort of were in the exact same boat. And I think that said it all. So, so basically, when after Ed Wood happened, we sort of started thinking, well, what else should we do? And we knew we sort of had a brief window of time where we might be able to get another one of these things made. And Larry Flint had been a whole section of the People vs. Larry Flint where Larry's like in the courthouse wearing a diaper and throwing oranges at a judge and stuff like that. That all happened in L.A. when Scott and I were in college. So we used to, when we were roommates, get the LA Times and read the Metro section and just kind of, just reading newspaper articles, read like a Marx Brothers routine. So we sort of looked at each other and said, what about a Larry Flint movie? And we sort of got that made, doing the same thing we did with Ed Wood, where Ed Wood, we managed to get a Tim Burton, kind of the one person to get a movie like that made. With Larry Flint, we got Oliver Stone, who at that time was sort of making controversial films, and we managed to get that made through Columbia, and we started an association with a director I have a great deal of fun from Milos Forman. But we basically, by the end of the great man thing, we sort of good things like, a pornographer who fights for First Amendment rights. Is he sincere or is he not sincere? It doesn't matter. With Andy Kaufman, it was, a comedian who isn't interested in being funny. We produced a film called Autofocus, which was, sort of about a television star who's actually more interested in having sex with people who recognize him on the street than he is in choosing any kind of quality projects. So we had this, we basically made a bunch of films right in a row that sort of, examine this kind of alternate history of the United States. And it caught on in a big way. I feel like every year now you have 3 or 4 of these movies, particularly during Oscar season, where, they're sort of, and we certainly weren't the first. I mean, there are movies before, I props to an actor named Gary Oldman, who really did make 2 of these movies, 2 of our kind of movies beforehand, Sid and Nancy and Prick Up Your Ears, which definitely fit into our wheelhouse and were quite influential when we first started out.
Yeah, it must be interesting now going back. You talked about the time when Larry Flint was throwing oranges in the courtroom and everything, right around the time of the whole OJ thing going on too, right?
No, that's about 10 years apart. Because the time the OJ thing was going on was actually when we were making The People vs. Larry Flint. Milos Forman was, as was everyone, was completely obsessed at the trial. We actually cast one of our actors off of Court TV. We got a phone call from Milos one night. He was watching Court TV, and an analysis guy who's like a law professor at NYU was, a senior OJ analysis for Court TV or whatever. And Milos was like, he looks just like Jerry Falwell's lawyer. So we wound up, a guy named Burton Newborn, and we wound up casting him as Jerry Falwell's lawyer. And it was interesting, like in the screenplay, when you go to all these legal things, you tend to shorten it all just for the sake of, movie time. During the OJ trial, Milos was so influenced by everything that was happening in the courtroom and felt that people were now so used to seeing when on the courtroom, he had to expand all that stuff. So it's all, hand the paper to the bailiff, hand the paper, so there was a lot of just, really, you want to take this? But he felt, people were so used now to watching court on television that he wanted some of those courtroom scenes expanded.
What was it like working with Foreman?
He's the best. Big personality, but a very giving man, and a very person who's very interested in bringing out the best in other people. He looks at a film as almost like a sponge, where you can kind of like, you cast people who are so right for the part, or who basically are the part. So, as he says, even their mistakes are correct. He likes to give people freedom to, outside input into the thing. He's a guy who never, he wants to hear your opinion and wants to be, filmmaking is a process. That doesn't mean he doesn't have a strong hand. I mean, his movie certainly has a Milos Forman element to all of his films, but there's the humanity too. And I think, it was an honor to make 2 films.
And when it comes to Ed Wood, I read the script, and it was definitely a lot longer than what ended up on screen. Were there any segments that you missed necessarily when you saw it for the first time?
Oh, not at all. I mean, Ed Wood I think it's the opposite, where, Tim famously directed our first draft for that movie. I mean, it's almost word for word. The only things that happened were lifts. There are 2 things happened. Lifts And when Bill Murray took on the role of Bunny Breckenridge, Bunny was layered throughout the piece a little bit more, and so you couldn't just have Bill Murray show up on the set and be an extra. But no, I don't miss anything. And you have to, there are certain stages of filmmaking. There's writing a script, there's making the film, and then there's editing. And editing, you have to be very conscious of the butts in the seats and is this going on too long? Is this, so in the writing stage, you want to make things as clear as possible. And sometimes in the editing stage, you realize, you know what? You don't need to explain who this person is. They can just be there. And so I'm not even talking specifically about Ed Wood, but it's very rare that Scott and I, we might complain about you want to cut the scene or not film the scene. We might challenge the director in that sense or a producer in that sense. However, once it's in the editing room, I think we're always open to the idea of like, do you need this scene? I would always rather have the scene in my back pocket in the editing room. So when you have that horrible test screening in Pasadena and people say, I don't understand this, or you have that long, and you can add that scene back in, or there's certain, every scene in a script has a certain reason to exist. And sometimes it can go, sometimes it can't. And editing is a place where you sort of reshape things.
Now, when it came to Ed Wood, this was your first kind of picture where you're working with a real subject, correct?
Sure. I mean, I'll say that no. The weird thing is that both Problem Child and our first script, Homemakers, which didn't get made, had their genesis out of newspaper stories that we actually saw. They were completely ridiculous, but we totally didn't use the actual stories. But yes, so even our broad comedies had an element of torn from the headlines. But yes, we were Ed Wood is the first biopic, sure.
I was just curious how beholden you felt necessarily at that point in your career to be 100% accurate to history, or was it, I mean, for me, it feels like the story comes first and the accuracy or whatever, maybe it's there, maybe it's not necessarily there, but you want to kind of have the flavor of it.
There's nothing wrong with what you just said. I think we tend to be a little bit more, you are making drama out of recent history. So you got to make sure the story is there. It can't just be in the script because it happened. The difference between real life and movies is that movies have to make sense. Real life does not have to make sense. In the middle of a phone conversation, a semi truck can just smash into me and I'm dead. That wouldn't work on a film because it wasn't set up. You need to cut to the bar first, like where the truck driver is getting a beer and whatever, So what happens in these biopics, and it's not Ed Wood, it's every movie, is that you're turning someone's life into 2 hours. When you turn someone's life into 2 hours, you can't show everything. So you have to figure out what you have to show, and you have to figure out what part of his life interests you, or what part of his life makes the story. So you're admitting things. You're saying, you know what? I know he moved to Iowa for 5 years, but I don't really care about that Iowa section. Yes, he had that. She was married to that guy for that brief period, but let's leave the first husband out, just because we don't have time for it. Regular movies don't act that way. Jerry Maguire doesn't just go off and grab another job and go on vacation in the middle of his movie. So you have to figure out what it is. I'm talking about the movies, the TV show we're at right now, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, where we had 10 hours, which sounds like a lot, but we're doing 9 months of a trial, and there's so much information, and so many characters, and so many things. We're trying to be extremely accurate in that show, but sometimes that means, all right, this stuff happened in the court. It happened over a week, but we're making a 3-minute scene. Something like Derek Sheck's DNA evidence presentation that goes on forever. But we have to make it a 3-minute scene where you understand what his point is, plus you understand the drama between the characters in the scene. So that's where it becomes an art. And you never want to do something where the character is you don't want to do something where you're making a real person do something that they wouldn't have done in real life. But in order to make transitions and things like that, there is some invention going on. But there's an invention going on any time you watch any media whatsoever. People always say, like, well, your movie's not a documentary. And I would say, a documentary's not a documentary. People think, if a guy says, a documentary says, I didn't kill her, and you cut to a meadow and a deer running around, whatever. That's different than if he says, "I didn't kill her," and then all of a sudden you put a little piece of music underneath. Dun, 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 one says he did kill her, one says he didn't kill her. So it's all a matter of manipulation and what you want to say. And I think that Scott and I would never make a movie or a TV show about something that we don't have something to say about, or about a figure. So we always, that's why, what Oliver Stone got criticized a lot for always having an agenda, and I always would defend Oliver by saying, thank God he has an agenda. Like, I want to see a filmmaker have an agenda. That, I think, it makes quality work, actually. So anyway, that's how we feel about it's very important to stick to the facts, stick to the truth, but you also have to make drama out of it too.
Right. I just know Ed Wood really appeals to a lot of very particular film fans, so I was curious as far as how much backlash you might have gotten when it came to, like, oh, that wasn't accurate, those kind of things.
Well, in the case of all of our projects, we find that it's the people that you think will most love a project that actually go after you the most. Like, people who are the huge fans who know everything, and particularly in the type of people we've chosen to write about over the years tend to be very obscure. Tend to be, so the people who were fans of them, it meant something to them. There was the fact that you knew more about Andy Kaufman than anyone else in your town, that was your badge of honor. And what happens is, then the movie comes out and you go to school the next day, and that kid you don't like now thinks he knows everything about Andy Kaufman, and he thinks this, the Carnegie Hall show happened when it happened in the movie, and also we call them so it drives you crazy, it drives that person crazy, that's no longer their thing, and every single manipulation becomes some badge of honor that to point out that, wait a second, this is a lie, this is a lie, this is a lie. It's not necessarily a lie, it's just, we're turning it into, we're turning someone's true life story into, a film. The thing was, Ed Wood was one of those things where there wasn't a whole lot of information about these people at the time. It was pre-internet, and we really had just interviews in Cult Movies Magazine and Rudy Gray's excellent book, A Nightmare of Ecstasy, to go on, which is just interviews with people surviving, people in Ed Wood's entourage. And so, the thing about Ed Wood is that we didn't know how people met each other. That a lot of that is invented. But I often say that, if we really wanted to mess with the truth, we would have made Leonard Linda the third act. If you look at it from a screenwriting point of view, it's like, all right, he wants to make movies, and then he makes these silly monster movies, and the third act he realizes, you know what? No, I've got to tell the truth. I've got to put my own story on screen. But and then that becomes the third act. Ed's in his own movie about himself, and he's a personal filmmaker, and it's triumphant in that way. We thought we didn't have the right to move the films around like that. We did feel that way about Man on the Moon, where we did move Carnegie Hall to the third act, but we also had Andy Kaufman start the film, saying that the movies are lies. It's they manipulate things. They change things around for dramatical purposes, and we thought it was Kaufman-esque to use Andy's life the way Andy would, where it just that Andy's life was all about questioning what actually happened, what didn't happen. So we had a little more freedom in that movie.
How much research do you guys have to do before you start working on one of these things? What did you do when you came to Andy Kaufman to find out so much about him?
Too much research. The thing about all these people is none of them there was Nightmare of Ecstasy for Ed Wood, but the other people had books about them. It really became, we had to act like journalists and track people down, or go to old, research material, go to libraries and microfiche and all that kind of stuff. That's quite different than what we did for the people for O.J. Simpson, which was based on Jeffrey Toobin's excellent book, but we also wound up reading every single book written by every single character. So there's, Marsha wrote a book, Chris wrote a book, Johnny wrote 2 books, Shapiro wrote a book. There's all the think piece books like Vincent Bugalosi and jurors wrote books, and there's all the court transcripts, and so it's an endless wormhole of information, and you got to keep that all straight in your head, and it can be quite daunting. We're doing the Patricia Hearst kidnapping right now, and there's a lot of info on that particular thing that's making my brain bleed. It's also based on Jeffrey Toobin is currently writing a book, and he's sending us the chapters as he finishes them, and we're also doing our own research on it. And it's also with our producing partners, Nina Jacobson and Brad Simpson, who we did the O.J. Simpson program with, and they've got a lot of similarities in that sort of a crime that becomes a cultural phenomenon. Patricia Hearst was on the cover of Newsweek, I think 7 times in 1 year. So, it's a fascinating story. I think it's going to be a very interesting film, but we got to get a handle on it.
Is it true that you came up with the 3 shells for Demolition Man?
Ha, ha, ha. That's so funny. I'm not going to take complete credit for it. Daniel Waters, who I mentioned earlier, from our TV show Beyond Our Show, he's my best friend. We went to high school together. We were roommates. After he was a roommate with me, he was a roommate with Scott, and whatever. He was my best man at my wedding. He's the godfather of my children. So whatever. There are Dan Waters lines in my scripts, and there are my lines in Dan's scripts, and I'm going to suggest a case of Rossera at the end of Heather's, but there's, the 3 seashells was, Dan was talking to me while I was going to the bathroom one day, and he was asking, and it literally just, I was at the toilet, had like sort of potpourri next to the toilet, and I think there was some seashells, and I was like, and the conversation rose from that. So then I go back and forth in terms of like who actually came up with the lines, but I'll give Dan the credit for that. But it came out of the conversation we had while I was taking it down.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Karaszewski. This was great talking with you.
Okay, great. No problem. It was fun. You're a smart guy.
Now, you grew up in the Soviet Union in the 70s. When did you emigrate?
I moved to United Kingdom about 10 years ago. I was traveling quite a lot in previous times. I lived for a couple of years in Germany. But actually, it is just the recent decade that I'm in England.
So you were a Soviet citizen for a long darn time.
Absolutely.
What was it like growing up over there?
It was probably a kind of secure feeling of pretty much knowing what is where and what is happening next. And if you are a child, you take a lot of things just normal. And when it started to change, then it was a really radical change.
The theremin is such an unusual instrument. I mean, just that there's no real physical interaction with the instrument. When you're playing it, what are you seeing in your mind's eye? Are you kind of picturing something to interact with?
If you play the theremin, you have to be very well concentrated on the sound, because there's no other orientation how to find the sound. You have to concentrate. You have to know very well which sound you want to play, and then you coordinate. You find this coordination between your movement and your inner ear. That means I'm not really imagining any pictures, but it is a little bit similar to meditation or image of yourself before singing. So before singing, you have to imagine the melody you're going to sing.
For folks who don't know how the theremin works, can you kind of explain as far as like what your hands are doing? Because it's very
it's fascinating to watch someone play the theremin.
Yes. Well, this is absolutely unique technique. Technique of playing. I stand in front of a box with two antennae, and I move my hands near those antennae, and the thing is, the antennae are connected to sound generators, and it creates the open electromagnetic field around the antenna, which I interact with. And by moving my hands near the antenna, I change the capacity of the field, and I influence the tuning of the oscillators. So everything is happening. I'm controlling the melody this way by my ear, because I know if I go closer to the antenna, to the right antenna, vertical antenna, with my body, actually, with my hand, I increase the frequency. I change the pitch. It gets higher. If I go away from the antenna, it gets lower. With my other hand, with my left hand over a loop antenna, I change the volume. By moving the hand away from the antenna, I increase the volume, and back to the antenna, I make it silent, actually. So that's how the playing happens on the theremin.
And you were kind of in a unique position, being able to be taught by the instrument's inventor, by Leon Theremin himself. What was he like as a teacher?
Well, Lev Theremin was absolutely a unique person, and I think I was taught by his personality, the way how he was communicating with the world, with people, not less than in the way how he presented his theremin to me. For the whole life, I keep this image of him as an old man with a very young soul, and a very vital and very young-looking old man. I think that was most important for me at that point. Obviously, he played, and he taught me with his example, just his own example, and then he had so much tolerance with just to hear for my beginners exercises how I play the theremin. If you start, the sounds are not very nice, and someone has to be really has to have a lot of tolerance to teach the theremin, and that's what he had. And I think, and I'm sure he was really enjoying those moments. It was more or less like music, making music together, because he was correcting my intonation normally by whistling, because he always had this slight way of humor that he put in everything he did and everything he said. So he corrected normally not by voice, but by whistling, for example. That was him as a teacher.
When you first started to play recitals, was there any sort of resistance at the time to an electronic instrument being kind of brought into the theater?
The 1970s in Russia weren't particularly good years for electronic music in general. And the theremin at that time was pretty much not understood. It was presented by this old inventor, Lev Theremin, and for inventors in Soviet Russia, it was quite difficult to develop their inventions, and for an old person it was even more difficult. So I think most of people didn't really understand what you can do with such invention. For me, at that time already, was probably the main. I kept this idea, and maybe I can keep this idea still, that just to show to more people, and to explain them how interesting it is, how different music you can do with this. And how wonderful is this invention?
When you were doing these concerts, what were some of the songs that you were playing? Were they classical pieces, or were there more things of your own invention?
Yes, at the beginning it were classical pieces. Normally was like Ave Maria by Schubert and this one by Saint-Saëns. I started to play in the concerts. I started to play my compositions a little bit later. So I used the theremin in my earlier compositions as well. Since I learned the theremin, I wanted to add it to my compositions, actually.
Can you tell me what it was like when you met Brian Eno and started to collaborate with him?
Well, the collaboration with Brian Eno was through composer Michael Malin, and that was him who actually had this the whole communication with Brian Eno. And Misha Malin invited me to do recordings for Brian Eno, and we did about 7 pieces, I think, or even more. And sent it to Brian. And then Brian came to Moscow, and I met him, and we arranged the meeting of Brian with Leon Theremin. It was a very touching meeting, by the way.
When did you meet up with Howard Shore? Because you and he have worked together a lot over the years.
Well, it was when Howard Shore composed his music for Ed Wood movie, and they invited me to record the music in London. The recording were done in London. At that time, I was working for a theater in Hamburg, in Germany, and being a Russian citizen, it was not very simple to travel straight away to a different country and to work, to do some work. So it was quite an adventure at that time to get a visa, work permit, whatever, to arrive on time for the recording. I think this work was very, had this floor of this adventure a lot. But the meeting was absolutely nice, and I was happy to work with Howard Shore later for some other projects as well.
Can you tell me a little bit about The Black Rider and Alice?
I came to Hamburg to play in musical by Tom Waits and Bob Wilson, Alice in Wonderland. It was in 1992, and the idea of Tom Waits was to create the little Wonderland in the orchestra. He collected all sort of very exotic instruments, and the theremin was a big part of it, of course, and the theremin was also some kind of between the orchestra and the stage. So I was a little bit higher than the orchestra, and the theremin played both parts, the musical music effect and theatrical effect, actually. And working with Tom Waits was real fun. I have to say, at that time I didn't speak any word of English, and our communication was really musical communication. He would give us some sketches, and everything else he was explained with his emotion, with his movements, or any kind of gests he would add in to explain how he wants us to play, and musicians had to find out how they will do this working.
Your work on Alice is just absolutely gorgeous. I love the use of the theremin in that production.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Yeah, I was curious what he would be like to work with, because he seems to have such a public persona, and I wasn't sure if that was his persona at all times or not.
I mean, it is a very creative person. He, the whole communication was to create the musical, it was work on the creation.
So you knew no English at that particular time?
No, I didn't.
That's crazy. And now you are super fluent in it sounds like.
Thank you.
When it comes to your own work, what are some of your favorite things that you've done over the years?
Well, there are many of different kinds. And one of them is the ballet by Lera Auerbach, The Little Mermaid. This ballet was premiered in Copenhagen in 2005 for anniversary of Hans Christian Andersen. And later it came and was played for almost 10 years on the scene of Hamburger Opera. And actually it was played in many other countries like China and Japan and Russia and United States. So it was on tour. And this is absolutely beautiful ballet, and this is wonderful music, very emotional, sort of post-romantic, but obviously it is contemporary music. And the theremin has a role of the voice of the Little Mermaid in this ballet. So it is something very sensitive, very lyrical, and at the same time not human voice. This is something that I really like. I really like this music, and every time I played this ballet in the orchestra, on particular moments, the tears came into my eyes. So it's a very emotional moments.
Well, it's brilliant to have the theremin as the voice of the Little Mermaid, because so much of that is all about when she has a voice and when she doesn't. That's
exactly yes.
Gorgeous. Oh, that's great.
Mm.
Now, can you tell me what was it like? I just want to go back a little bit to Ed Wood. And what was that experience like for you recording that?
It was my very first experience of recording music for a film. And in general, I was quite young at that time, and I still had to learn a lot. Even my English wasn't that developed at that time at all. And for me, it was mainly the interest that I'm playing with the orchestra, and how is it to work with this film measurement when you play to the movie, to the particular scene. That was quite new for me. So actually everything was new.
Now, what was Howard Shore like to collaborate with?
Very, very lovely person, and always, I would say, very soft-spoken and very flexible in the way of, on some point he would say, Lera's doing improvising, so he was developing things since the recording session as well, and we actually kept communications, kept in touch later, and I recorded music for his Existence and for one of his computer games musics as well, and actually I did the recording for the CD of this Ed Wood music.
Now, what are you working on these days?
I'm working on several projects, and one of them is a project of music for films with chamber ensembles, seven people ensemble, and there I play music from Mars Attack and Charlie and Chocolate Fabric, The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Spellbound, and I normally do my own arrangements for each particular set for those concerts, so there's a lot of work involved.
Oh, wow. With Spellbound and The Day the Earth Stood Still, I mean, those are the theremin songs for me.
That's right, yeah. This is classic. Yeah, that's something that's made the theremin sound popular, for many people, yeah.
Well, where can people go to find out more about you and about your music?
There's a lot of information on my website and also my YouTube channel with all different videos on it, where you can see experimental stuff and classical pieces.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Kavina. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I wanted to ask you about Ed Wood. Can you tell me about how you got the role and what it was like?
Well, that's actually a really cool story. You know me, I'll have 18 stories, so you got to stop me and sift through and tell me move on. With me, you know, it's kind of like when the college basketball coach goes to Mike Starr bumper. It's kind of like a pinball machine. And all the things they tell you when people come to speak, or you might go to speak somewhere, you or me might go speak somewhere and advise college students or people in a class or in any business. Like, you know, one leads to another. I remember one of my first Broadway show guy told me, he was closing one night, my friend Lloyd Batista had been around a long time, and he said, you know, from one job you get 3 or lose 3. Back when I did Mad Dog and Glory, and I'm one of the holdouts on the East Coast, and we did that in Chicago, I started to get some heat from it, but not what you would think. Some things I got from it, the funniest things, but out of nowhere, as they say, but connected somewhat. I get called into a movie called Cabin Boy. And it's not like I'm trying to impress anyone. You know, it's not like, hey, let me tell you, just the way we're talking, you know. Or I know I've been monopolizing the conversation, but I don't know what it was. I was telling stories, and Adam said, geez, Tim Burton came to us. He loved Get a Life, you know, the Chris Elliott show. And he said, come up with a story. And they didn't know. And someone suggested, let's do a crazy version of Captain's Courageous or something, you know. But he said, Tim Burton said, can you come up with anything for Chris? So sure enough, I get to play the giant, the salesman with the pocket protector who's married to Annie Magnuson, who has 8 arms and is, the great performance artist. And so we're having fun on the set. We're just laughing. All these different things that happened. Laura Walters and all these. Letterman showed up on it, right? And Brian Doyle Murray and all these great characters. And we're just having a great time. I played it. They wanted me to play really, really New York, this and that. You know, just have fun. Nothing had to make sense, right? Well, one day, Adam says to me, Tim's doing a movie about Ed Wood, who made the worst original Plan 9 from Outer Space. Also, you would be great as the first producer. Now, I have to tell you, so many times you hear it after the fact, or someone says, I'm writing something, you're perfect for it, or we're trying to do something. I don't know, 95% maybe it doesn't happen, and that's not a knock on people. There's a lot of well-intentioned. Sometimes there's deals have to be made. Someone says, oh, I want you to play this part, and it happens to act as a lot of people run into each other or whatever. So sure enough, one day Tim Burton comes to the set, and they introduced me, and he was eating a plate of spaghetti that I couldn't get through. It was a huge plate. It was just like shoveling. It was so funny. It was so nice. He was so pleasant and friendly, and it was lunch, and he's got this big thing of spaghetti talking, and Adam goes, don't you think he would be great for Georgie Weiss, the producer? And he goes, yeah, you know. Now, again, there are times that people do things, they say things, and they're polite or whatever. So, oh, it's a great idea, and it just floats away somewhere. Well, that's how I got it. He just went, yeah, that'd be great. You know, and there are people who really do what they say and say what they do, whatever, you know. And I'm not saying that people that don't do it, you know, a lot of times there's well-intentioned people, but it was really funny. Next thing I know, down the line, we're doing Ed Wood. And I just did all my reading, and the script was the original script was like 147 pages, something. Great writer, and I should know Kaczynski, because I always mix him up, saying the name with the actor from Chicago who's now doing a Broadway show with, is it Ted or something? But Kaczynski, I think that's his name, and he was relatively new at the time, I think, but I know he's done so many great screenplays, and there was stuff they just had to cut out. There was so many funny things that some we shot, a lot of them we shot, and there's other people that were in it that just, there wasn't time for all of it, you know. There's so many big things. It was really a great script, and I guess they had to pare it down to time. So you see things like very quick collages of like the buffalo herd to the buffalo stampede. Well, that was in a scene, as I remember, that was in a scene we did in a studio. And he just shows me all the stuff he wants to do. I go, what the hell is this? What the hell is this shit? You know? And he's showing me buffalo stampedes and all this stock footage. You know, they were able to communicate that in like a collage of all me watching the movie later on or something, or him showing the movie. I can't remember. But, you know, I finally said, shoot whatever baloney you want. You know, just make it 7.5 reels, I think was the line. And every day was just so much fun. I mean, great crew of guys, you know, like Max Casella and all these guys, you know, who were the film crew. We had laughs on set and off set, and everybody was so nice. Sarah Jessica Parker and Johnny Depp was the best. I mean, at the time, I don't know what kind of image they were trying to portray of him, but he was like super pro, nicest person, and as opposite from a diva or any, I don't know what. People were asking me questions, I remember, because it was right around, I think, after Dumb and Dumber, we were shooting it. When Dumb and Dumber came out. And I didn't get it connected with Dumb and Dumber at all, as I remember. But I just remember being interviewed or something by someone, and they wanted all these terrible stories about John. I said, I'm not covering for him. I'm telling you, this is him. He's like one of the nicest people. One day, Tim Burton came over to us and said, geez, we're moving along fast. Any chance we can do tomorrow's scene in the afternoon? Johnny Depp says, that's fine with me. How about you, Mike? Yeah. I mean, there's only one right answer to that question. And fortunately, Fortunately, I do, if I have a fairly big part, so I try to learn the whole, I don't know where I got that habit, maybe from the theater or the old school guys. I learned the whole film just in case. Because, you know, a lot of times you have cover sets if you're doing certain types of films where if it's raining, they say, oh, we got to go to this. You better be prepared to do this. So I just figure I learned the whole film. Very well prepared for, hopefully, for what we're going to do that week or that night. But this was, that was going to be tomorrow. So it was really funny. We just ran right through it. And about one of the only directions Tim gave me, yells out, Mike Starr, Mike Starr. And he comes in and kind of waving his arms. He goes, no, you're good. You know what you're doing. Just do what you're doing. I went, Tim, tell him something. He goes, no, you know what to do. Just do what you're doing. Definitely, he was right, thank God, you know. Did work out well.
I know you do a lot of research when you're playing these parts, especially when you're playing somebody historical. Yeah. What kind of stuff did you find out about the real Georgie Weiss?
I saw that I looked nothing like him. He was a short, bald-headed guy. I want to say that Tim suggested a book, or someone suggested a book to me and gave it. I can't remember. And I just read things about him and then just tried to infuse my own personality, I guess, if I was him. So I'd be a lie to say, like, oh, I read that he was outgoing and bubbly or whatever. I can't remember if that just kind of came up together with the lines and just for, you know, what I looked like and how I was. And I think a lot of it was in the script, but also I read about him, you know, I read about Ed Wood and then tried to find out about Georgie Weiss as much as I could. So I guess what came on the screen was a lot of it came from research, hopefully, you know, and of course it was right there on the page, so you didn't have too much. But I think that's a great question. It's, you know, it's over 20 years ago, and I'm trying to remember where things came from. I'd like to take credit for doing hard work, but I don't know. I remember, I think the pastrami sandwich might have been my idea, maybe. I don't know, you know, growing up, you watch so many of those films with that Hollywood guy. Get me this guy. Yeah, what? Yeah, you know, and actually grew up with people like him. Not that we're in the movie business, but, you know, kind of had that energy, you know. But I think the script was so good, and it just spoke for itself, so it just kind of came out. And it's interesting how many actors love that movie, you know, and how many directors and people like yourself doing this, you know, who just love film and all the involvement you've had in film. And it's really interesting how much people love that movie. The two movies that I find interesting that people love are Ed Wood and Miller's Crossing, that I've been involved in. Sometimes Mad Dog and Glory. Someone like Kevin Smith really loved that movie, you know, loved the character and the movie and everything. The character I was involved in and the film. And I mean, I would get a diverse group of people from the business coming up to me, whether it's at the screening or premiere or whatever. And it's funny how the ones that when I was really acting, that sometimes you get that response, oh, this is going to be difficult. This will be, I got to do this, I got to do that, I have to do a dialect, speak a different language or whatever, and really walk differently. And then sometimes there's something that just kind of happened. You know what I mean? It was like, in a similar way to Goodfellas, you know what I mean? Like that I was so comfortable that it just seemed to, Goodfellas I got from reading but talking to people on all sides of the story, that the guy was an outgoing, fun guy. But with Ed Wood, it was reading. I did get to meet Ed Wood's wife was at the premiere, and that was cool. And she started talking to me about Georgie White. She was very complimentary, but we were talking about how physically different I was, which is okay,
Did you get to work much with Martin-Landau on that one?
Just had lunch with him, a couple of times. I was in there was a scene where it was hard to really, and I was not quite the background, wasn't the foreground, when we're filming him, and then he's having the conversation with Ed Wood, with Johnny Depp. I believe I was in that one where I kind of stand around watching it. You cut to me like shaking my head or whatever, this and that. I think that was in the film, but no interaction with him as I remember, except that having great conversations at lunch with him because he told me, I don't know if he was, I'm from Flushing, Queens, Flushing, Jamaica area. People were starting to know what Queens is. And there was an area of Forest Hills where the actual tennis began, the famous tennis tournament. They call it the Forest Hills, but it's actually by the old Chase Stadium in Flushing, by the old World's Fair from '64. There's an area of Forest Hills, and as I remember, Martin-Landau said that his sister was from there. His sister lived there. His sister was from there. Sound like Jackie Gleason here. And I can't remember if he told me he lived there, but we were talking about Queens a lot. Just great stories, and just anything you tell me. It was just so nice. So, the best thing people say about an actor a lot of times that not only was he excellent, but he was down to earth, and it was just being with this regular guy, and he wound up. I was so glad to see him. He did so much, and of course the Academy Award and everything. But he also, you see Entourage. He reached into to people he had been involved with. So I didn't actually get to talk to him. Bill Murray, I would see, and I had worked with already, and he just loves to break my balls about things, and he got massages. He got massages for the cast and crew, everyone on the set that day. I remember he brought someone in and got massages for everybody. But he's really funny, He's just, whenever I see him, he just gives me shit about something. But he's so great. He was great in that. But remember the scene, and then Bill references it. He talks about Karloff, who's probably can't smell my shit. He did that. That I saw film. And I can't remember if I just watched it, or I watched it one way or the other, or if I was like standing there in the background watching it. You know what I mean? Like they turn around. It's not quite background. There's a shot of him talking to Martin-Landau, Johnny talking to Martin-Landau, Ed Wood, and Bela Lugosi. And then they cut back to us watching it, I think. I just remember watching that and almost losing it, laughing so hard, when he says that. And then Bill has a great line. Bill has that great line, well, he couldn't smell his shit. He still does that in the car. I'm remembering the movie now. Jeez, what a dynamite movie. This is fun.
Oh, yeah. I rewatched it again last week, and it holds up so well.
Yeah, it does. Oh, that's great to hear. Johnny Depp also, of course, he still does it, but they were starting to realize the range he had, I think, because people know what Bill the Great was. I'm not sure what period it is because he had done Jumpsuit this year, but Johnny would take the most interesting roles, and really take chances. If you think the way he acted, the way he spoke at it, and you just believe him, you're sitting there, I was in World War II, I got your movie this day. And I was hysterical.
I just loved him as the eternal optimist.
Yeah, and he was just very sincere. But geez, when he replaces Sarah Jessica Parker was the coolest. I got to see her again. I was doing the Broadway show The Odd Couple with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick, and she came back, and we just kind of laughed about that because I don't know if that was her first film or what, but again, she was another person that was nice then and still has a tremendous reputation for being a good person, you know, and a very classy person.
It's such a great ensemble cast. I mean, other than just, you know, the main leads, I mean, everybody that's there behind the camera, as it were. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
God,
yeah. How about D'Onofrio? Vincent's great. I don't know if I even knew him at the time or love him, but boy.
I love the set that you're on when it's your office. Just it looks so, you know, crowded with garbage and just the cinder block walls.
Those perverted Okies love that shit. That's right, girls. And I make movies like Girls in Chains, this and that. It's funny. I just watched, when excellent film Trumbo, and John Goodman and Stephen Root had to play these guys. You know, when they went to do when he had to write for all the cheesy companies, and I remember him saying, "I make shit." You know, it was kind of the line that Georgie has, was to say, "Kid, you got me confused with." The famous director, and he goes, "I make crap." So it was similar, you know, those guys are lurking out there, you know. It was very interesting. I got a kick out of seeing that. You got me confused with David O. Selznick or something like that. Yeah, I don't make.
What are you working on these days?
Well, my next project, you know, Michael Imperioli from The Sopranos, right?
Oh, yeah.
Played Chris. John Benton. There's a few interesting people, trying to think of the fellow's names. He directed this movie, Vincent Piazza. I played a Polish-American guy who was in Gotti's crew or something, and Vincent Piazza was called The Wannabes. Well, the director, Vincent Imperial, all these guys are getting together and doing this film. You ready for this? It's about a cabaret called Cabaret Maxime, and I'm supposed to go to Portugal in about 2 weeks for a couple of weeks playing this cheesy Las Vegas promoter. And Michael requested me, geez, I get to play these cheesy guys, huh? Low-level guys. But lovable. This guy's lovable. But Michael, it's a film about an old school, like, burlesque in current times. Real classic burlesque, like seaside place that military, all different people back in the day would go to that style of on their leave. And the new world is taking over, whether new mobsters or gentrification. And we're going to, I don't remember that they referenced where we're at, but it's going to be shot in Lisbon, Portugal. So that's what I'm supposed to go to. It's a really good script, and Michael Imperial is producing, and he's the lead. The film that I worked with this director on was in the Tribeca Film Festival along with Goodfellas when we did the anniversary last year, and Robert De Niro had us all out there, which was great. I'm trying to think. You know what? I did an episode of that Adventures, The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt on Netflix. That is a wild film. I'm actually trying to get on the other side and produce some stuff. Did this thing in Sweden. It's a show. We're trying to do this. There was one serious, like, sci-fi mystery type film we were trying to get done. They were going to involve me in acting and producing, but also now we're talking about doing a Top Gear type of show. You know, that Top Gear, only about tech gadgets. And there's a few things here. I have a few, I sound like the old line. So I have some projects, but partner, we're trying to get it done with a couple of interesting people with really good directing track records and TV, and it's a couple of interesting scripts. Trying to do that, so until I'm actually real about it, I won't say anything because, you know, not really jinx it, but unless it's really real. I did a couple of interesting, this young actor director who my friend taught at school had these young people have 6 shorts that they want to make one film of about relationships. So I played this guy conflicted, this blue collar guy married, you know, conflicted about his own sexuality, sees his old friend or whatever. That I don't know what became of that. I got to call the guy.
The Cinematic Misadventures of Ed Wood. What kind of possessed you and Charles Pratt to write this?
It was as much this movie as anything else. This movie had kind of stoked a fire of interest within both of us. And we had seen the main Ed Wood movies, the movies that everybody's seen. But we were curious, about the movies that you don't see, which there are more than 20 movies that most Ed Wood fans still haven't seen. And they're probably better off for having not seen them. But we cover them in the book, and we try to make the chapters funny like we would expect the movies to be. They're not always really funny, the movies. A lot of times they're more sad than funny, just because of the depths that he sinks to in the pornographic world, even in that milieu. His desperation sometimes was a little bit sad. But we were big fans of Wood, and we still are big fans of Wood, but I'd say I'm more a fan of the naive image that this movie gives of Ed Wood than the real Ed Wood, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. He's kind of like almost a Boy Scout in the film.
Yes, he is. Well, and at the end of the movie, they kind of gloss over. They put up a card that says that he went in to do nudie monster movies after that, which kind of glosses over the fact that he was doing hardcore pornography at some of the points. And they didn't have monsters in them. Maybe one or two have supernatural elements, but most of them are porn, flat out.
I mean, I've read some of his books, and those are definitely dirty. Most of them are very dirty.
Yes. And he definitely tended to gravitate back toward the things that he really liked, like Angora sweaters. And, one thing we found when we did the book that we thought was fascinating and kind of sad is that in Glen or Glenda, he begs for the acceptance of the public for people that are transvestites. He really, in several of his movies, really looks down upon and has really negative things to say about gay people. And also his depictions of rape are kind of less than PC, you might say.
I know a lot of these movies were fairly readily available. I remember seeing Jailbait and The Sinister Urge, but it sounds like you dug a little bit deeper than that.
We did. We just scoured the internet, and we got lucky. A few of them came out this last year. There were 3 that had never been officially released, one that had been waiting for a release but had been bootlegged all over the place. They were all pornography, but they were released right at the end of the book. So we actually had to back up the book a few months so we could get copies in hand and cover those. But the book was a blast, and it was interesting to learn about Ed Wood, and I am still fascinated by Wood because, he had very little talent but a lot of drive, and that kept him in the film industry in one way or another for a long period of time. And I think that says a lot for what drive and enthusiasm, can really bring.
Tell me what you found as far as what the real Ed Wood was like versus the Ed Wood of the movie. Of course, I know the movie is built for a movie-going audience. We're not going to see warts and all. We're going to see a very straightforward structure, first act, second act, third act. But how does that compare to what the real Ed Wood was like as far as what you found?
Well, the big thing is the thing that we talked about in the Orgy of the Dead episode for me, and that's sort of the myth of him being a director that takes one take on each shot, and they go so far in the movie as to say, Eddie's fucking brilliant, he can shoot 35 scenes in a day, which isn't necessarily accurate. We found the outtakes of Take It Out and Trade, which is a lost film, lost pornography film. In the outtakes, you can clearly see that he did sometimes 15 takes of the same scene. They were all equally bad because he was not a good director. But, they look like they might have been the only take that had been taken. But sometimes you'd see, 10 and 15 takes of the same scene over and over again. So, he did try to protect himself, or at least by the end of his career he did. But he just didn't always have the skills to really go about it the right way, I think.
And as far as some of his demons, what were some of those that you found?
He was a huge alcoholic, apparently, just a huge alcoholic, and they gloss over that in the movie. I recently read a story about Bela Lugosi's ex-wife saying that he had stolen a dress of hers out of the bathroom one time, and she caught him wearing it somewhere, which is also interesting because in the movie, he meets Bela after he's already left his wife, or his wife has left him. So apparently they actually did have some, interconnecting storyline in real life. I think the movie does a great job. It takes a lot of dramatic liberties, some of which are a lot of fun. I think that it really serves the film Johnny Depp's naive sort of portrayal of Wood. You know, I think it's a great, great film. But as far as Wood goes and his demons, I think his big one was his alcoholism. That's eventually pretty much what killed him.
Now, as far as some of those liberties that they took, I know you have a good story about the Orson Welles meeting.
As you know, I did a book with Gary Graver called Making Movies with Orson Welles, and Gary Graver was Orson Welles' longtime cinematographer for something like the last 15 years of his life. Gary told me one time, nobody does Orson right in movies. When they portray him in movies, it's never right. The only one that really gets it right and captures the man is Ed Wood. And he loved D'Onofrio's performance, and he just spoke so highly of it. But he told me the one way that I know that that story is not accurate is that I never could get him to eat at Musso and Frank's, which is the restaurant that he runs into him in the film. He said, I never could get him to eat there. He said, I tried for years to get him to eat there, but he wouldn't eat there. He said the big thing with Orson was Orson liked to introduce people to restaurants that he liked, and he really got a thrill out of that, but he never wanted to eat anywhere that anybody else wanted to eat, which I thought was kind of a funny story. And also interesting in that scene, I might point out, because it's not pointed out very often, that the bartender is played by the real Conrad Brooks. I'm not surprised he doesn't have any lines because, you know, we made a movie called Zombiegeddon with Conrad a few years ago, and Conrad's a really awful actor, even by awful actor standards. Even by Wood standards, Conrad Brooks is a terrible actor. A pretty nice guy, but just a horrendous actor. So I don't know if maybe he had lines that got removed, but I think he's got one line that's like, here's your drink.
I remember for a while it was like independent filmmakers would flock to him or Lloyd Kaufman and put them in their movies as if they gave them some sort of like indie cachet.
Well, you know, and we were one of the first ones to do that. We had both of those guys in there, but you're right. You know, and our movie actually was one of the very, very first microfilms to really have a cast of well-known actors. And we're proud of that. You know, for whatever deficiencies the movie itself has, that's something that we've been proud of because it's been imitated time and time again since, trying to have sort of an all-star cast, which, you know, may consist mainly of washed-up convention actors, but, you know, still it was an all-star cast for a movie shot on a very, very low budget.
Well, and it's nice to see some of those folks working.
It is. The one that we were really happy to have was Ed Neal, Edwin Neal, who was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it was funny because when he walked in, it was like, holy shit, here's a real actor. When he acted, even in the room, it felt real. And that was something that, you know, you didn't experience with the Conrad Brookses.
Getting back to Wood's later films, I had heard so many different things about the film Venus Flytrap. Can you kind of clear that up for me as far as what his involvement was with that film?
I'm trying to remember. Venus Flytrap is definitely one of my favorites of his later films. He wrote it. It was released in Japan, I believe. It was a sci-fi film, and it's definitely sort of a return to form for him. And it's got a lot of the old staples of, you know, his storylines. There's a sort of a jungle swamp nearby, and just all these really weird things. But it's a blast. It's a really, really fun movie. Definitely one of the very best movies of his last, 10 years.
He was making so much porn right around this time, and so many of them, it felt like because that same year, actually it was a year later, Necromania came out, which I had been warned about seeing like years ago. And it was like, please just do not ever even lay your eyes on this film.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So Venus Flytrap, even though most people don't really know it, it's definitely a high point in there. And I might point out that right after I finished this book, I found out that Ed Wood had worked on another movie that most people don't know about, and it's called Meat Cleaver Massacre. And it's worth looking up. But I actually got the cinematographer to admit that, or to tell us that Wood directed several scenes of the film just to help out, and he hung around on the set a lot. And there's actually an actor that appears to be Ed Wood in one scene and is credited as Ed Wood. Now, some people do dispute whether or not this is really him. Maybe it's some other goofy-looking man named Ed Wood that just happens to be there. But like I said, the cinematographer told us flat out that, he did assist on the movie. And as low as Meat Cleaver Massacre may be down the food scale of films, it is still another sort of high point for Wood at that time at the end of his career when he was really mired in hardcore pornography.
Now, are there any good porn films that he did?
Not really. Some of the stuff like Orgy of the Dead, which is sort of soft-core, you wouldn't even call it like porn, but it's right on the cusp. It's fun. It still has those Woodyan qualities to it. One of the things that we point out in the book that I found fascinating was that Wood, wrote an essay and wrote some stuff really against pornography and porn producers, saying they were just basically the scum of the earth. And then within just a few years later, he himself was making porn, which tells you, to what desperate levels he would go to get published or to get a movie out there or just to be working.
And when it came to his early work, kind of I'm bouncing back and forth in chronology here, but as far as the whole story of him getting the gig doing Glen or Glenda, does that ring pretty true as far as what was in the Burton film?
As far as what I've seen, it's pretty true. Now, I've got to guess that some of it is, artistic liberty, because it's just too good of a story, the way it's told. It seems pretty close. It does seem like he basically bullshitted his way into that job, and by presenting that he was going to make a movie that really was not what he made. And it's a fun movie. I don't know what his relationship was like with Georgie, the producer, after the film was made in real life, but the setup to get there seems pretty accurate.
Now, was he one to use the stock footage as much as he did?
He used stock footage like crazy. He even, he would use stock footage like, well, here's some shitty stock footage. I can stick this into a movie somewhere. And I think he did actually write around found stock footage, found ways to integrate it in. Most famously, obviously, is that buffalo scene from Glen or Glenda, which is just silly and bizarre and kind of atrocious, but sort of perfect in the, as far as it being an Ed Wood film. I mean, you wouldn't change that for the world because it's just so goofy.
It's almost avant-garde.
It is, isn't it?
He's almost doing a little Bruce Conner beforehand.
Right. And, one of the things I think that this movie does really well that it doesn't get talked about enough is the casting is perfect. Like George the Animal Steele as Tor Johnson. How could you ever find a better Tor Johnson? And somebody I noticed when I went back and rewatched the movie is Max Casella, who plays little Paul Marco in the movie. And, he's on Vinyl now, the HBO series, and he's just really this kind of rugged, rough, tough guy on that show. But when you watch Ed Wood, he's just got a little baby face, just looks like a sweet little guy. And I think the dialogue in this movie is amazing. I'd credit, the two screenwriters, Scott and Larry, because, some of the dialogue is hilarious. My three favorite lines are "Nobody gives two fucks for Bela." That is my favorite. Another one that Landau has is "Let's shoot this fucker." And then the Sarah Jessica Parker line, "Wood Productions, the mark of quality." Those are my three favorite lines by far. And I think those guys did a brilliant job. And one thing that I did find out when I interviewed Larry, and he probably told you this, was that the script that they shot was pretty much the first draft, which is amazing.
Yeah, I was reading the book of the script and watching the movie at the same time, and it's just omissions. The only changes, it seems like, are just omitting a couple things, and there's a lift of some dialogue from one place to another,
right,
just to omit his second wife in there. But yeah, it is one of the least tinkered with scripts that I've ever dealt with on this show.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's one of the definite high water marks for Tim Burton. It's my favorite Tim Burton film. Maybe Mars Attacks is close, but that's my favorite.
So what are you working on these days?
Working on lots of stuff. I've got a collection of novellas coming out through a Japanese publisher later in the year, and it's called Skrilla, which is an urban slang term for money. It's 3 crime novellas. I'm finishing up my book on Quentin Tarantino, which you are in. As you know, I've been working on that for the 20 years I've known you. So I'm happy that that's finally going forward. And then lots of other things that I can't really talk about right now, because some of them are still kind of tied up. And I am doing another Tarantino-related film. I'm working on a book with Craig Hammond, the co-writer and co-director with Tarantino of an early film called My Best Friend's Birthday. And we're doing a book on My Best Friend's Birthday. which will examine, how they made the movie and the script and all that, and have original photographs. So I think that's going to be fun.
Steve Pachowski called that movie the Rosetta Stone of Tarantino's work, and I could really see that when I finally watched it.
Right. And Steve Pachowski's a great guy, by the way. He's sort of my boss over there at Shock Cinema. A great guy. I think he's especially great today because he just put some money in my bank account today. So I'm a big fan of his today, especially.
3 cheers for Steve Pachowski.
Right, 3 cheers.
I had heard that Tarantino was retiring after, his 10th film?
Supposedly. But, he talks so much about shit that he'll never do or that he wants to do. And, he's a tremendous talent, I think. We may differ on how much we think he's talented, but I will say that he's, kind of full of shit at times.
I won't disagree with that. Do you have a chapter of the films that Tarantino never made?
I do. Well, I was going to. I guess the book has evolved so far. At one time it was going to be a companion, and then a book called the Quentin Tarantino FAQ came out, and it was basically the book that I was making. So I basically took out the interviews, which were the best part of the book by far anyway, and made it just a collection of interviews about Quentin Tarantino. So the name of the book is going to be called Conversations on Quentin Tarantino, which is kind of a generic title, but it sort of sums up what it is.
Right. Well, maybe you'll come up with something snappy in the interim.
Maybe.
So, Andrew, if people are interested in reading more of your work, where can they go to find it?
I always tell people the easiest place to find my work is on Amazon. Pretty much everything I've written is still in print. Just working on my, 29th book. I had a novella that just fell out of print here recently, so it's not all in print, but most of it is. I'm a little bit biased, but I like my books, so there you go. They say as a writer, and I'm sure you'll attest to this, that when you write nonfiction, you're basically writing the book that you would like to see as a fan.
Andrew Rausch, the hardest working man in show business books, I thank you very much for your time.
Hey, thank you for having me on again, buddy.
Welcome back. This week we were talking about the film and filmmaker Ed Wood. So we did hear from Lydia Kavina, and I have to say I was very glad to talk to her. And really, I have to thank you, Steve, for pointing that out to me, that I should be talking to her, because she's got such an amazing career and she plays into the score so well. And this is one of the first times that Tim Burton didn't use Danny Elfman for the score, and I can't say I really noticed a difference with this one. It felt right to me. Everything really clicked, and if anything, it didn't have that same Danny Elfman feel, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, initially I was disappointed not seeing his name on the credits, but over time I think it's probably better for the movie. It's a little more toned down, I think, than the typical Danny Elfman score. Like, there's not a lot of giant choirs or strings going all over the place. It was just very, very simple, deceptively simple, I would say, because some of the stuff that he's doing is pretty complicated, and a little bit. I loved the use of dissonance really works here.
For me, it was, was Howard Shore. So Howard Shore, I know mostly from his stuff with Cronenberg. And it has this 1950s feel to me. Like, with the bongos and the kind of the jazzy elements. And then I'm a big fan of sort of, I guess, what you would call exotica or space age bachelor pad music from the 50s. So people like Martin Denny and Juan Garcia Esquivel, and then modern in this era in the 90s, there was a group called Combustible Edison that sort of took up the mantle of that, was sort of the opposite coin of the whole swing revival, if you remember that. And I really loved that it had that kind of feel at times, that it was playing into this sort of exotica stuff where it's kind of Oriental sounding, but it's not technically Asian music. It's sort of taking elements of Hawaiian and all of this other stuff that isn't necessarily native. It's what people think it might be. Sort of like Chinese food in a way. It's not really Chinese food. It's an Americanized idea.
Yeah, it's that kind of that whole post-war soldiers coming back from Hawaii, like, you know, bringing that sound with them. And then I think the theremin, it definitely transports you back to the 50s, even though I don't think Ed Wood ever used a theremin on any of his scores or any of the library music that he used. I mean, it really helps to set the mood.
Yeah.
And the time period.
Well, I think it definitely plays into the one that most people would know from that era of its use in a score would be The Day the Earth Stood Still. So it's that sort of creepy sound, and then obviously into the 60s, Good Vibrations and things like that, where people heard theremins used.
Steve's got some information about Good Vibrations in the theremin.
It's a bombshell. Get ready. So the instrument used on Good Vibrations was not actually a theremin.
See, we just learned something, kids.
Yeah.
It was kind of an Americanized version of a French instrument that was like the theremin, but you kind of have a fretboard that you can visualize where the pitches are. So it's not as ethereal when you're playing it. You're not looking for the notes in the same way that you are on a theremin. So, fun fact.
well, my favorite band that currently uses a theremin is based out of Detroit, and that would be the Amino Acids. So,
yes.
So if you're into basically surf punk with sci-fi, corny 50s sci-fi themes, no lyrics, just sort of surf music with played really fast. They use a lot of samples from 50s songs, 50s films, and then also a theremin on stage.
And I just finally found a use for my own theremin on a piece of music after I think I bought it 10 or 15 years ago, and I finally found a use for it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say that there was theremin being used in Tim Burton's next film, Mars Attacks.
Yeah, but I think I'm not sure why he didn't use Lydia, but I think it's a different player.
Well, yeah, it seems like Lydia and Howard Shore, they ended up working together a couple times. And so I don't know if it was just, I'm not going to use the same person, because he was working then again with Danny Elfman. So I don't know if Danny was like, yeah, I'm not going to use the same person that you just used with Howard Shore.
I'm sure his extended set of musicians from Oingo Boingo, I'm sure one of those guys probably plays theremin. So, yeah.
And I was really happy to see Corla Pandit show up in the film. And at first I was just like, is that somebody that looks like him, or is that really him? So it was one of those, like, stick around for the credits and see if his name actually showed up. And sure enough, it was really him. And talk about a holdover from those days of Exotica. I mean, he was one of the players back then, going into, I think we would call it the Good Life section at WCBN, and seeing the Les Baxter and the Martin Denny, you would find the Corla Pandit records back then too. And it's just like, wow, okay. And some great stuff that he was doing. So I was really happy to see him show up and be featured so prominently in the film during that whole striptease party for Bride of the Atom section.
And to still be so lively on his instrument he was 70 or so when they shot that?
He had to have been, yeah. Well, I'm sure the turban helps,
the mystic powers.
Yeah, it helps, and it helps cover up the age stuff too. So he could have been bald under that. He could have had a big old wrinkly skull going on. He could have had a face in the back of his face.
Like, or an entirely new alien head up there.
Yes, exactly. Whispering commands to him. Yeah, the one thing I was very happy to see, kind of going back to the film a little bit, was I like how, Steve, you mentioned the soldiers coming back from the war and bringing things with them. I forgot about Ed's wartime experience and just how that helped shape his art, and seeing that opening play that the whole film opens with this play section, and seeing these two soldiers out on the battlefield and being visited by an angel and everything. I didn't pick up the first few times that I saw this, just how much the war plays into this. This definitely is one of these kind of post-war, it almost feels a little noirish as far as the way that the war has affected Ed as our hero, because he does bring up the war quite a few times, even to the point where he's talking about, wearing his bra and panties under his outfit when he's parachuting into, some bad situations. And then him being kind of a injured veteran too, with all of his teeth being missing, or his front top teeth being missing. So I didn't pick up on that the first few times that I saw this, but I was glad to see that he is kind of given some weight by that. He seems to have some issues when it comes to coming back from the war, and I was glad to see that.
Kind of noticed that a lot more this last time that I watched it too. And if I were a snobbier film person, I might say something like, horror films being inspired by the disfigured soldiers of World War I, and we've got this icon of horror standing at the door on All Hallows Eve, and he's rather impotent at that point, but the actual, I guess, war wound, for lack of a better term, is the one that's actually frightening to the children.
Right.
I thought that was kind of interesting.
And then I did like that whole thing too, where, the big speech that I mentioned before that Bella gives, that actually has some political ramifications too. That whole thing where Hungary wants him to come back, and he's not sure what they would do to him if he came back. Would they treat him like a king? Would they put him in a gulag, or what would happen to him? So he's just doesn't want to go back to home. He has no home anymore. So I love that speech has that real resonance to it.
And I love how the music cue at that point, it really starts off, this melancholy sadness where you're feeling for Bella, the character, but then it turns on a dime as soon as he talks about atomic race of supermen, and then the music gets kind of kitschy and over the top, and I just that's just a great little scene there.
Home. I have no home. Hunted, despised, living like an animal. The jungle is my home. But I shall show the world that I can be its master. I shall perfect my own race of people. A race of atomic supermen that will conquer the world.
We were talking a little bit offline too about Howard Shore's score for this, and I always like when it can be just a little passage here or there, but I always enjoy when composers kind of quote themselves. And I know that you had found a musical quote from Ed Wood in another Howard Shore score.
I hadn't rewatched the film yet, but I was listening to the commentary track as I was walking my dog around the neighborhood, and in the background you could hear the closing music where they leave the theater, and you've got this really kind of sweet melody that then starts to morph into a little darker territory. Stopped and I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds really familiar. And I came home, looked up Lord of the Rings, and the cue in Ed Wood it's almost a prototype of the One Ring leitmotif that shows up all through the Lord of the Rings. So if you listen to that last track of the Ed Wood soundtrack, I'm not sure what the name of the track is offhand, but listen to that about maybe 30 seconds in, and then go to YouTube and bring up the prologue, One Ring to Rule Them All, and you'll kind of hear how it's the One Ring theme has a less notes, but it's definitely, there's some similarities going on there. And I don't know, I'm sure I'm not the first person to have noticed that, but I'd never seen it written anywhere.
Well, Jeffrey Jones would tell you about something that has too many notes in it.
There are, in fact, only so many notes the ear can hear in the course of an evening.
That's true.
It's funny that you say that, Steve, because we actually talked about Howard Shore a little bit before when we were doing Nothing Lasts Forever. And there are, Rob, you noticed this, that there was music in Nothing Lasts Forever that was then used in one of Kevin Smith's films.
There's the song on the moon that is in Dogma, which is the theme song for the movie's fast food chain.
So apparently, in some of these littler films, Howard's going to recycle stuff for some of his bigger films.
Well, I mean, with Nothing Lasts Forever, he could probably recycle the whole score because most people haven't seen it. So it's if you want to know the checkered history of the release of that thing, go listen to that episode we did. Sadly, that thing needs to be released, and we've been banging the drum on it for a while, but hopefully it will someday.
Yeah, and then the last time it was supposed to play on Turner Classic Movies, it got yanked. Like the day that it was supposed to play, they suddenly announced, nope, sorry, folks.
Yeah.
No, Nothing Lasts Forever here.
Nothing to see here. Keep moving. I just have to say that if you haven't seen Nightmare of Ecstasy or read it, make sure to read that. If you enjoy this film, hopefully it's a gateway drug into all these other places, such as reading up on Bela Lugosi or reading up on Vampira or watching the rest of Ed Wood's films or whatever, because that's kind of what it did for me. Regardless if it's a fictionalized account, I still think it's a rather inspirational account for anyone who's a creative type.
Yeah, it is such a love letter to filmmaking, and it just really does, not just filmmaking though, pretty much any dream that you might have. If there's something out there that you want, this film really talks to that whole idea of just going for it. And that's one of the things I like too, is that Ed, with his group, his ragtag group of oddballs and misfits, that everybody is pulling for him and they're all working for one another. There's no, once Dolores Fuller gets out of the scene, there's no bad seed amongst there. And now you could say that he's just living in an echo chamber of people telling him what he wants to hear. But actually what I think it is more is people who are being supportive of him rather than just being a bunch of sycophants.
Yeah, and also seeing, that they are capable of, joining that journey. Like, you hear so many people say, oh, I wish I could make a movie. Well, make a movie. Ed did it. And I think I was watching, is it Look Back in Angora? Is that?
Yes.
That's one of the documentaries, or there were a couple on YouTube that I was watching in preparation. And it mentioned several people who had worked with Ed and then went on to bigger things. So, I mean, not only was his fictional representation like inspiring people, but the actual Ed, was inspiring his stable of actors. And, is it Dolores that went on to write songs for Elvis? That's pretty incredible.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And some damn good ones, too. I mean, Rockahula Baby is pretty awesome.
Which I have was remade, I think maybe 10 odd years back by Junior Brown on one of his albums. So I'm a big Junior Brown fan. So I looked at it and I was like, oh, and there's her name on the credits of the song.
And I came across another clip on YouTube of her getting a Lifetime Achievement Award for some from the Grammy Foundation, I think, or ASCAP maybe. Crazy.
She did well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say before you start throwing around things like Ed Wood made the worst movies ever made, I would say go ahead and try to make your own damn movie and then see if you do any better than Ed Wood could. Just putting that out there.
Put it this way. We've talked about Manos before, and Manos is excruciating at 65 minutes to watch without a commentary by the lovable scamps over at MST3K. I could probably watch an Ed Wood film without commentary from someone. It actually moves. Yeah, sure, there are some aspects that are a little funky, but no, it's far from being the worst stuff ever made.
While it's nice that the Medved brothers helped kind of bring new light to a lot of filmmakers through their golden turkeys and all these kind of things, it's very much a backhanded compliment, but I'm glad that they did that. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, you guys really don't have room to talk about doing really bad work.
Has any other director on the Golden Turkey list achieved the same notoriety as Ed? I mean, is he the top?
Well, he was voted their worst filmmaker, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who else was on the list, though.
Just wondering why we don't know many more names from that list.
Yeah, that would be a good thing to look up. I probably should do that.
When you look at the other stuff that's on Mystery Science Theater, for example, the oeuvre of Coleman Francis, for example, that stuff's hard to watch compared to Ed Wood.
Well, yeah, I mean, God, try to watch Side Hackers sometime.
Robot Monster.
Plus, you also have to remember that the Medved brothers who wrote that book, when they wrote it in, 78, 79, didn't have the huge outlay of videotape that would come about in the 80s and 90s when there was so much stuff that was released. So this, I'd have to say they'd have to go back and retitle that book, the worst films ever made that you could only see on TV or in a theater. So it's, some of that stuff that eventually went to VHS. Woof.
Yeah, when they were scraping the bottom of the barrel there for a lot of stuff. Worst performance as Jesus Christ was Ted Neely in Jesus Christ Superstar. Worst blaxploitation film, Scream Blackula Scream. Jesus just does not do it for me. Sorry. All right, I'm going to get out of here. Or else I'll just obsess over this list.
The most popular spectator sport in America is not the Super Bowl, or the Olympics, or the World Series, or the Heavyweight Championship. It's the beauty pageant. From the moment she's born, every girl is eligible. All it takes is a pretty face, a little talent, a lot of luck, and a great big smile.
Smile, though your heart is aching.
Smile. Smile. The story of a teenage beauty pageant. The girls who enter it, the people who run it, and what it does to a small American town.
Just be yourselves and keep smiling.
I know you all came to see a whale of a show, and a whale of a show it is.
Wow, any real lookers this year?
Oh, you men.
Our club has spent a lot of time and money trying to help these young people become responsible adults.
Rotting maggots of death. Everything counts up here. Your grades, your personality, the judges' conference.
Select a girl that you would be proud to have as your own daughter.
Well, what would you do if your best friend was unwed and pregnant?
Excuse me? Could you tell us why you think you'd like to go into missionary work?
I like helping people.
That's what this game is all about.
I want to be a veterinarian or a nun.
You didn't jump up and down enough when Miss Woodland won. Beauty contest judges like their emotions big.
Spring is here. I hear my God, I've smiled so much my gums are raw.
Well, put some Vaseline on your teeth. It helps your... Listen to me. It helps your lips glide over.
You're kidding me.
No, all the girls do it.
I can see why you want to help these girls. They seem very worthwhile.
Right on, son.
We're not really competing with each other. We're more friends.
We have faith, we have hope.
It's a competition.
Now, if you just keep smiling, you can win.
Smile, what's the use of crying?
It's every parent's hope and every girl's dream to be all an American girl should be and wear that winning smile.
Just smile.
That's right. We're back next week where we'll be talking about the film Smile on a star-studded episode of The Projection Booth. Before we go, I want to thank this week's guest co-hosts, Steve Schultes and Rob St. Mary. Steve, what are some of the projects that you've been working on lately?
Currently working on a film called American Prophet. True story about a young hockey-playing priest here in Detroit who is called up to be a bishop just after the 1967 riots. Film I scored called The Cabining is now on HD on demand, I think in most places, and then iTunes and Amazon. That's about it.
Where did you use your theremin last?
Oh, I last used my theremin on a little short called Friendlies, a little alien abduction thing that I did with director Steve Copera. Kind of a fun little thing we did while we're waiting to shoot a feature.
And Mr. St. Mary, as always, it is great to have you back. How is everything going for you?
Still insanely busy, but trying to enjoy my life as much as possible. I continue to plug away at pushing the Orbit book. Won a 2016 Michigan Notable Book Award for it. And this month, starting in April, we'll be doing a little book tour, libraries, April, May, and June. And all the information is available at my new website, robstmary.com. So it's robstmary.com, and you can find out all about the various stuff I got going on. And plus, if you have an interest in getting an autographed copy of the book and you happen to live out of the area, you can get it there. And then also, if you want one of those really groovy Orbit t-shirts like Quentin Tarantino wore in Pulp Fiction, you can get that there as well. So, and also, if you just want to say hi, more than willing to say hi.
Are you over on the Twitters?
I'm on the Twitters, as always, RobDET, at RobDET. So I hear from people from time to time. As a matter of fact, I walked into a record store in town here, a good friend of ours who listens quite often, and said, "Hey, what happened to you?" And I said, "Well, got too busy. I had to take a break." So, but he still listens. He said, keep on trucking, Mike White.
I did not put a hit out on Rob's life, and he is not trapped in a hole in my basement where I lower a microphone down to him once a month.
It talks into the microphone again, or it gets the hose again.
Yes, you will, precious. You will get the hose.
Well, thank you again, Steve and Rob, for coming on the show, and thanks to everybody for listening. Be sure to go on over to our website, projection-booth.com, for more information about what you heard today and links to things like our Patreon page, our Facebook, our Twitter, and our iTunes, where I encourage everybody to rate and review the show. We only have 157 ratings on the show, and we sure have a whole hell of a lot more listeners than that. So do your part to help the Projection Booth take over the world.
That's a wrap. If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.